I hit the go live button on YouTube. I think it takes like 30 seconds.
You're multi-streaming through what's it called?
No.
Restream.io.
No, it's this program called SaltEMike. I'll tell you about it later. It's pretty sick.
Nice. Can they hear us right now?
Yes.
Oh.
I'll give it.
Or
You got 20 seconds, so I'll give you a little countdown in a moment, and I'll intro us in.
do we come in on 3 or like right before 3 or like?
You don't
right
come in
after
at
3?
all. I'll come in for you. You're good. Here it
Just
comes.
give you a hard time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Answer the Call. Today, we have two awesome guests that have been incredibly vocal on the Master Modes changes coming to Star Citizen. So we've done a lot of these podcasts for Answer the Call for a while. As you can see, Croncy isn't here today. I was hoping to get multiple more guests, and Croncy's not super into PvP or anything, so it didn't really make sense to have him on. But we got Avenger and Vergjl, and the thing I want to start out with before we start with anything, and before I intro our amazing guests, is Master Modes has been a thing that people are very passionate about, and people have been, in my opinion, like kind of nasty in my chat. I've seen something at the beginning of the YouTube live stream, things like that. So before we start anything, be respectful of other people's opinions. You don't have to agree with them, but be respectful. Okay? Simple as that. Now, Avenger 1 is here. Vergjl is here. Avenger, we'll start with you since you're next to me on the screen. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, in case people don't know you, which would be surprising to me if they don't know who you are. I think this is your forte. So if we're talking about these kind of subjects, they should know who you are, but just in case.
Well, thanks for having me on again.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Well, if you go by Spectrum, I am the messiah of everything terrible in the game. But
Yeah.
I teach people how to play the game to the best of my ability. I've been instructing flight combat and PvP space for about 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I love to do. I genuinely love Star Citizen. I want the game to be the best it can be, and the way I do that and the way I contribute is by teaching people how to play the game. So,
yep,
that's who I am.
Yep,
and I have apparently very fiery opinions.
I don't think they're so fiery, but people have been fired up by them for sure, and we'll definitely get into that. And Vergjl, I think, who has been around the space for a while, but has more recently started making more, I guess I would say, consistent YouTube content. But who are you, Vergjl, and how can people find you? I guess for Avenger, it's Avenger__1, and Vergjl, it's a little bit different. So links will be in the description on YouTube, and I'll post some links in Twitch chat for you guys.
Yeah, so I don't know, I've been making like a lot of like dogfighting content and stuff like that just for the fun of it. But you can find me at VER9JL, and I'm kind of in the same boat as Avenger. We're both just, sweaty degenerate PvPers.
And both of you guys are org leaders, right? You guys each run orgs in the game.
Yeah, so Avenger runs Avenger Squadron, and then I run a group called Shadow Moses.
Yep.
So yeah.
All right. So with all the introductions out of the way, Master Mode's bad.
Cool.
Okay,
take that one.
Let's get right into it. Can we find a couple things that we agree on just to set the tone, right?
I would love to start out with that. Yeah, before you guys even get started, what is Master Modes, right? And I think a lot of people are maybe not understanding that at least this initial thing seems to be a framework that is where they're building the flight model off of, and most people are sort of okay with what it is, but yeah.
So as far as I understand, Master Modes is a rehaul and revision of the current flight system.
Yep.
Right? Changing the mechanics to allow for role-based gameplay, and allowing for the future of turret gameplay and power management, all that stuff, which is great, and I'm all for it. I've been very vocal that Master Modes does solve some of the core issues that the live model could never solve, because mechanically it's unsolvable. and with the implementation of an afterburner mechanic and navigation mode and stuff, we've kind of developed the flight model into a place where the future, if it's done right, could look a lot brighter for a lot of ships in Star Citizen, not just the lighter fighters that we've seen become very dominant in the live model, and for a lot of reasons.
That doesn't sound
Right?
very doom and gloomy, which is what everybody seems to be saying about your opinion so far. At least that's how I've gathered.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about before the podcast started too, right? There's always going to be people who take your words and then will twist them and stuff. And there is definitely this tribalism going on right now where you have one side of the community that, and again, I feel like most people are either unaware or don't really know what's going on. But there's definitely like a propaganda kind of war going on right now. And the reality is there's much less PvP people out there. And so we kind of have to be loud because like racers, you're just going to get drowned out in the sea of other propaganda about stuff like that. Right. And I use the word propaganda because that's what it is. I personally, and I'm sure Vergjl would agree with me on this, is we're looking for a way forward to make Star Citizen 1 the best game it can be, 2 a place where all ships have a meaningful place in the combat meta, and 3 a way forward to make sure that the game is enjoyable and exciting and deep enough that's going to hold your attention for the better part of 10 or even 20 years. Would we agree on that, Vergjl?
And for everyone,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
And say?
And for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Not just
Yes.
the highest end PvPers. I mean, one of the things that I guess I've been critical about Avengers opinions in particular, but I want to go to Vergjl after I say this, and then we'll get back to you, Avenger, and maybe you can respond to this, is that a lot of people I think that got frustrated, and myself in particular, was in one of your videos, I think probably the more popular one that people got butthurt about, I guess, is the idea of having to get good, I guess, was sort of what the vibe was, right? Is part of the process. And it absolutely is. It always will be, right? Like nobody will ever should be able to pop into a game like this and be good on day one, right? You should have to put some effort in. And I think that's what you were saying. But I think a lot of people were taking it, and myself included initially, maybe a little bit in the wrong way. But we'll go to Vergjl. Let's talk about the idea of the skill ceilings. This is a big thing, the floor and the ceiling that a lot of people have been talking about. And I think this is something that Vergjl's talked about very, very vocally, and how he's a big fan of the fact that the skill floor is pretty low, but he's correct. I might be putting words in your mouth here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the skill ceiling is there and is high enough to be still interesting. I've watched both of every video that you guys have made on master modes leading up to this, and I think I'm getting that right. Am I on that, Vergjl, or no?
Yeah. So it's like the skill floor is like the entry level, like how easy is it to enter into playing master modes, and then the ceiling is how far you can push it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're happy because I know Avenger maybe isn't as happy with the ceiling as you may have been.
No, I'm with him on the ceiling. Like the ceiling has to come up. But the problem, and I think and I actually don't think Avenger thinks this way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Avenger, but the thing is, like, I think it's really great that the floor is much lower because like much more people are enjoying it. Like even they mentioned in SCL, right?
Yeah.
Like all the staff are PvPing for the first time now, like, and they didn't even have it in them to begin, like Bunton didn't, right?
Yep.
So all these people are getting in, and I think the entry level is great, but the ceiling and the depth needs to be there too, because like Avenger mentioned, it's got to last 10 years,
It has to last longer than that.
And my issue is like, I think that conversation's a bit more complex, right? It's like a ceiling can be anything. And I think right now when people say, oh, the ceiling's so high, I just don't like the shape of the ceiling, I would call it, which is where, like getting really good in live is, manipulating jank. Like it's trying to break the game when you've got the ability to and stuff like that. And I think that master modes is steering in a direction where if they lift the ceiling, it will be much better flight. It would make sense. The game will function and it won't be about just trying to break things. But with that being said, I agree with him right now. The ceiling needs to come up. And I
What
think they
what
agree
does
with
that look
that too.
like? What does that look like? And I'll shut up and allow you guys to converse about what the skill ceiling going up would look like. And
Do
what
you
does
want
it
me to
mean?
go start with that?
Sure, if you want. But make sure, because I'm seeing some things in Twitch chat at least around the idea of well, Star Citizen isn't just a dogfighting game, but that while that is true, I think we can add that to this part of the conversation is within that. So I guess go ahead, Avenger, and then
Sorry, I just
and then
want
we'll
to
go to
throw
Vergjl.
one thing. Yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm cutting you off there, Vergjl. Skill ceiling doesn't just mean combat in dogfighting.
Yeah.
Skill ceiling has everything to do with the depth and complexity of the game. Do you want a game where the engineering gameplay is meaningful and you can learn, and after a couple months you're still kind of tuning things and learning things and like, I really got a good feel for how to manage the power on the hammerhead because I don't know, the engineering flux capacitor likes to oscillate at this frequency a lot when it's getting hit by shields, and this
Yeah, we
ship
don't know
doesn't
where
do
they're
that.
going with it exactly yet, right?
But the point is, if you have a rookie engineer get on board, and he doesn't know what he's doing, he might blow your power conduits out rather than help you, right? That to me is the same thing as me saying, I want merging, I want flight characteristics, I want all these things for dogfighting. I want the same thing for mining, I want the same thing for engineering, I want the same thing for FPS gameplay. I want the same thing for all parts of Star Citizen, including the economy. So to people, again, right, people pigeonhole me and they say, Avenger 1 is this. They try to put me in a box and they're not listening to what I'm trying to say,
Yep.
right? Now, that may be my fault for not articulating it effectively. And people may be grabbing sound clips from streams and being like, see, A1 thinks this. And they don't listen to the whole
For the whole
conversation.
breath. Yeah.
But in reality, look, guys, if you don't want to listen, if you don't want to hear what I'm trying to say, then just don't comment, right? It's like,
it's that.
I mean, yeah. Well, if you're not gonna,
capable of that, that's
yeah,
impossible.
Don't
I
mean, they're gonna
with that one.
they're gonna do it anyway. But
comment.
yeah, but it's just be aware that like if your comments are coming from ignorance of what I'm trying to say, then you're just putting noise into the wind. So I'm not trying to be a dick. Just understand what I'm trying to say, and I will try to effectively articulate it this time around to really nail it down to be like, this is how I look at it. Look, I'm fighting for higher skill ceilings in all things, not just dogfighting. I personally have a stake in dogfighting, because I do it and I absolutely love it. I want there to be competitions and tournaments at CitizenCon for you guys to be entertained with. I want there to be a future where there is gameplay that you can play for 5 years and still feel like you're learning something. I want there to be a skill ceiling that you feel engaged with, because if you don't, you're going to get bored of it. You're going to quit the game, and then the game will eventually die because people just won't be playing it, and we'll have Elite Dangerous 2.0.
Yeah. All right.
So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and agreed. And the thing about the skill ceiling, I think you're making a really good point, is you can, within this system, and the fact that they're making these archetypes, from, I guess, my opinion, because again, we won't know until they're actually in our hands, but because there's archetypes and because there's all these like special tunings that they could do, when you're asking for the skill ceiling to go up in dogfighting PvP in specifically light fighters, let's say, for example, or medium fighters or heavy fighters, it sounds like they can do that separate from what a prospector might do, and they can tune that to make a prospector more interesting for a prospector, right? So Vergjl, I'll let you respond to the whole, what does the skill ceiling look like? But this is the state of Star Citizen PvP master modes, right? The master modes information that we have now is PvP information. We have very little information on what a Carrack, what a caterpillar might fly like in the game. So it's going to be very hard to dive into that and discuss the actual experiences we've had on with ships like those, because they're not in the tests that we have currently. So Vergjl, what does a skill ceiling look like for you? A better one, I should say.
Yeah, I think something that fits within the framework, right? Like I think you know, with the speeds that they've proposed, the complexity of the capacitors that they want to keep casual and stuff like that. But I think what's lacking right now is the maneuverability and agility.
Yeah.
I think that's the big one. Is like people crave positional combat more so. I know Avengers debate is like energy and momentum and stuff like this. And for me, like this is the flight tunings, right? So I think that the ceiling will come up positively with a like reduction of the gunnery, because I think the gunnery kind of snuffs out a lot of the ceiling.
What do you
You
mean
know,
by that?
the ease of the weaponry, like the aim assist, the weapon ranges are like gigantic now.
Mhm.
And they kind of snuff out a lot of the flight in that aspect. But I just want to cover one more thing, like
Sure.
before I pass it on to Avenger. I think Avenger kind of gets pigeonholed into people thinking that when he is asking for a higher skill ceiling, I think people are under the assumption that like he's talking about soloing the Death Star in his
Yeah, yeah.
arrow, or you know, taking out a group of 5 to 10. I don't think that's what he's describing, right? Like I think people are misunderstanding the argument. When I, you know, am like expressing my desire for a higher skilling, I'm expressing a desire for, you know, variation, like creativity, you know, like multiple ways to play the game and for it to be interesting in the long term, you know, and things like that. Like a reason to want to train with your friends. That doesn't mean it should be a barrier of entry, but the ability to do so, like a skill ceiling that allows people to compete if they want to push it that far.
Mm.
And that doesn't have to translate directly to power, right? Like just to be really good at an arrow doesn't mean that the arrow needs to be able to take on 5 to 10 fighters or something like this, right?
Gotcha.
And I think people are misunderstanding his debate with that. It's like I think Avenger, and I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but I'm pretty confident this is it. You know, when he is describing like he wants, you know, like the fighter gameplay to get deeper, I don't think his expectation is still that he should be killing, you know, winning 1v4s, you know, without breaking a sweat. You know, it's just more about making the gameplay last, you know, and not too simple. And like the best game I use as an example of a really low skill ceilings, Battlefield, right? Like Battlefield's a spectacle, and I love to compare that with master modes. It's like if you log on to or you go play any Battlefield game, it's great. You're the first 2 weeks you're absolutely immersed in this insane combat experience. But then what happens with every single Battlefield game that comes out? After 2 months, everybody walks out, right? And that's because there's not that much depth to it. Like once you've experienced the theatrics, you get bored of it. And I think that you know the game, the skill ceiling does need to come up, but it doesn't need to come up and have a toxic impact on the rest of the ecosystem. So to answer your original question, yeah, like I think that it depends on the ship roles and the archetypes, right? I think that the heavy fighters need the ceiling needs to come up, and you know we need to create creativity and variations to play the heavy fighter. And it's the same with all the archetypes. Like, so I say it's agility and maneuverability with the light fighter personality archetype. And then, you know, with multi crew, the ceiling needs to come up, or sorry, on the larger ships like the Constellation and the even, you know, larger classes or archetypes, you know, the ceiling needs to come up maybe in the engineering department, in the managing the
The
ship system
piloting,
department.
perhaps,
Yeah,
maybe, right?
yep.
Like that's
Managing
one
your crew.
that's one
Yep.
thing that I think might be really interesting to touch on a little bit later too. Is that I just want to make sure for the dummies and for me in particular, the it's all about. Here's how I'm gonna try and figure out your response. Do all the fights feel too similar right now? Is that one of the issues? Is that why it's feeling boring? Is it a little too? Every fight feels the same. Go ahead, Avenger.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off. I just
No,
want
there's no cutting. This is about
Okay,
you guys.
so
I'm gonna try to
so
stay out of this as much as possible.
yeah, so look, Master Modes conceptually is working on paper like they're saying, right?
hmm
The skill floor has been raised, and that was the intention, you
Yep.
know.
I
I
definitely
think
feel that for
Yogi,
me.
yeah, and I think Yogi's intention is to make the base experience better,
Mhm.
and that has been achieved, which I'm happy for. Like, I genuinely want there to be an easy game to pick up, and it's not super difficult to understand some of these concepts. It's like, what's a corkscrew? What's this? Like, those are still basics that you have to understand. A corkscrew, a merge, these kinds, like a turn fight or a one circle fight or two circle fight. These are basic concepts for flight combat. It's like playing a first person shooter game, and you need to understand that what's ADS, how am I going to strafe left and right? What's my reload button? Like, these are basics. Every FPS game has to have those basics. The problem is in master modes, we've lost some of those basics. We've lost the ability to do certain things because the tuning has disallowed us to express those movements, right? A lot of that is through the gunnery, because the gunnery is suppressing any kind of movement that is meaningful.
Yeah.
So you can move, like you can move anywhere you want to go. So you think you have control, you think you have some ability to make an effect on the fight, but guess what? It's meaningless, because no matter what you do, you strafe left, strafe right, up, down, roll, accelerate, there's nothing you can do. I'm going to gun you down, because the weapon velocities are so high, and the cone is so strong, and the fixed assist is so strong, and the ESP is so strong that a game basically aims for you, right? And I'm all for making the skill ceiling, or sorry, skill floor up to make it fun. But what we've lost in this tuning, not the mode, which is much different here, is we've lost a lot of that freedom expression of movement control and finesse that you're going to get from playing the experience. Now, Vergjl touched on before, talking about, like, sometimes people try to pigeonhole me and stuff, and I appreciate it. It's unfortunate that people are misunderstanding what I'm trying to say, where I'm trying to fight for an experience that everyone is going to enjoy more. Because if you look at games, look at the most popular games in the world right now, games like Dota 2, would you say that game has a low or a high skill ceiling?
High
enough to the point where it fills stadiums with fans, because people are watching people play. They're like, holy crap, they have never seen someone play like that.
Very low barrier to entry.
But low barrier to entry. This is the experience that I am trying to fight for and explain through education, through telling people, like, look, it's nice to have these things and this things, and I'm fighting for a different kind of tuning, but it's all stemming from, so this is something that me and Vergjl can get into here, right? Because we've disagreed on the way that this is going to get handled, rather than, we both agree, so let's just table this right here. We both agree that we want a high skill ceiling in the game, we want a low barrier to entry, and we want all ships to have a meaningful impact in the fight, correct?
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I think
so
you both seem to agree that the gunnery seems to be a big problem as well, from what I can tell here. Also, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the more mechanic stuff here. But we agree that we don't want a light fighter only meta, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And we want multi-crew ships to what?
Suck. Okay.
Matter.
Be good.
Be effective, right? Are multi-crew ships effective right now?
Yes and no. I think you showed a situation maybe where
I would say heavily so in the right circumstances.
Yeah.
That's what I would put.
So what would be those circumstances? Let me guess. Atmosphere.
Yeah, atmosphere under 1,000-meter range.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have control surfaces, so it's really hard to kind of touch on that. I think space should be kind of where we look at this, because that's more fleshed out, I guess, in a way. But I agree.
Then I'd say like under 1,000 meters.
Yeah. Now, there's two, like, me and Vergjl are coming from the two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Vergjl, so please step in if I'm saying something that you don't agree with. But
sure.
So my position for the longest time, and still kind of, because from my experience, is higher speeds leads to more flight expression, which leads to just more fun in general. Because you're flying a fighter, it should feel like you're flying a fighter, correct? Now, you could argue, well, 275 meters per second, which is the current SCM speeds, is really fast. That's like 900 something kilometers an hour. I mean, most dogfights in F-14s, F-15s, F-16s, if you're getting into actual turn fights, are not happening at 900 meters per second, But the reality is we're not playing DCS in space. We're playing Star Citizen. You know, we've walked away from the realism side of the game a long time ago. So people complaining like, well, it's 900 meters. Look, we're in the year
Yeah,
2953 or
and it's
whatever.
only getting less real day by
Oh,
day.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, just to jump in here, I am absolutely gloating by the as they're adding gameplay to the game, the community just losing their minds and are like, I don't understand. Why would they do this to my game? And it's like, oh wait, it's not a game, bro. And they're actually making it a game. And I've just been like, oh, this is so amazing. So sorry.
Right. I mean, growing pains are a real thing. We've all been through it. You
Yeah.
know, it is part of the process, and I'm all for it. You know, I've been very vocal about like, look, Master Modes is here to stay. We don't have time to make another flight model. This is what we've got. Either you like it or you don't. So choose right now whether you want to stick around and stay in the trenches and keep fighting for the experience, or be like, look, I don't agree with it anymore, and just walk away. Because that's the choice you've really got to make. I've told that to my team too. Because
can I jump in there for a second? I very much agree, but with a big caveat. It's at some point, this was like my big criticism of even maybe both of you a little bit, is yes, they need the feedback now, but how do you get the feedback without putting it in a PU situation? And it's like, it seems like the to me at times it feels like the sky's falling, but it's also one of these things where it's like, what do they do if they don't just fucking rip the Band-Aid off? What do you guys think about that in particular? Do they, is it enough what they've given us to make a proper opinion on master modes yet? Because again, I'm the ignorant one here. Have they given us enough to make a really super informed opinion from you guys, or do we still need the PU scenarios and the randomness of weapon choice and things like that we just don't currently have?
I'll let you take this one, Vergjl.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think you know, when you throw like PU objectives into the mix and stuff, and you know, like I think the UGFs will be a really contested spot and stuff like that, then yeah, like the game does change drastically. But no, I do think there's a wealth of information you can pull from the squadron battles. Like
Okay.
I don't think it paints the whole picture, but it paints a decent amount
Yeah.
of
Does
it
it
if
paint
you
enough?
like understand. Yeah, I would say it does in the
Okay.
group fight setting. Like
Cool.
we need to see more ships, more archetypes too, because some of these archetypes are on like they're not right in the middle, you know, for example. So yeah, like we need to see more ships, a little bit more variation, and stuff like that. Like for example, like the hammerhead's like an area denial ship, right? So you're not gonna, you know, people might be hopping into it expecting to chase down arrows and gladiuses and stuff, no problem. And they don't even realize that that's not the design of the ship. It's to prevent the gladiuses from getting close. So like when people are just avoiding the hammerhead in the squadron battle, that's literally the intent, because you just aren't supposed to go near it, and then you get, you know, blasted out of the sky. So yeah, we need to see it in the PU. And the big one for me with the SCL, which kind of stumped me, was how little they've thought of the whole nav mode meets SCM in combat scenarios. Like I know the piracy guys are freaking out since they've seen
Rightfully so,
SCL.
dude. What the
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah. Like I was just before I came here, I was watching Lenny on the Mongrel Squad stream, and you know he's freaking out, and I feel for him because those guys, you know, have really suffered patch to patch. Their loop just comes in and out based off of bugs and stuff, and you know, to find out that their mechanic won't even make it in a 323 essentially is pretty concerning. So yeah, like it needs to come into the PU. Absolutely, those tests need to start as soon as possible. But I think there is a wealth of information and value that Bunton's provided with the experimental squadron battle for sure.
Okay.
To answer your question,
Yeah.
you can take it, A1.
Yeah, so the question was, how's Master Modes going to fare in the PU, and do we have enough information to make an informed opinion about it?
Yeah.
Basically. I can't give an opinion on ships I can't fly yet.
Yeah.
But I have an idea of if the fundamental mechanics allow for the same issues to happen in live as they do in master modes, then what is really changing? Because think about it this way. I put a video up with the hammerhead, right? And yes, it's area denial, correct. But we can all agree, at least I'm assuming so, that 7 guys in a hammerhead shooting at a ship they can never hit, slowly dying, is probably not really great gameplay for the hammerhead. Considering the ships that they're engaging are the ships they're designed to kill. So if they haven't fixed that problem and instead they want to go with this precision mode so that we can shoot them from even farther away now with even more precision.
Yeah, that's scary too. That
Right.
wasn't even part of the video you showed. And just jumping in before you keep going, what Avenger's talking about is he put 4 Buccaneers, right, against 1 Hammerhead and stayed within, not within, like stayed farther away than about 2,000 meters and was still able to consistently hit the Hammerhead, damage it, and kill it. And it was, like Vergjl said, within 1,000 meters, you would be destroyed. They stayed out of that bubble and were still able to attack that ship. So very much exposing a problematic edge case of the situation, and a very problematic one because it basically broke the whole archetype system that they were going for in this scenario, I think. Sorry, Avenger, continue, just to clue people in who maybe didn't see the video.
So if you're playing basketball with a baseball or a basketball, but the rules are the same, the game will feel different, but it'll still be the same game, correct?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're going to play
Put the ball in the
basketball with a baseball, you're going to be like, this is dumb, but I mean, it's still kind of basketball. So to me, we have enough information to make an informed decision on the way the characteristics of the mechanics are working. And that's what we're discussing here, is how are the fundamental underlyings, the foundation of the flight systems being talked about, and how are they being implemented?
Mm-hmm.
And my position is the tuning is what's in question here. And the tuning, I feel like, suffocates so much of the skill expression and movement. And what it does is you want to increase the options for a pilot and for someone in combat. You don't want to decrease the options, because if you decrease the options, you decrease the skill ceiling, you decrease the amount of fun because you just have less to do. So they're trying to bring ships into a role. It's like, I have like they talked about, we have the interceptor role now. It does this and this. And then we have the light fighter role and it does this and this. And now we have this role and that role. Well, guess what? Only one role matters, like actually matters right now, is the interceptor.
Yeah.
Now, Vergjl, why is the interceptor the only role that matters really right now in PvP?
Oh, I think I disagree with you here because I know where you're going with this. But for me, it's the combination of weapons meets defense meets speed. And I think the answer for you is just going to be speed, right?
Well, I mean, obviously the Buccaneer has a lot of power in it, but I mean, you could have the same problem with a bunch of Merlins. Like, are you going to kill the Merlins? No, the Merlins are going to smoke groups of light fighters. They do it all the time.
I don't think I'd necessarily agree with like the. I haven't done a all snubs versus gladius test, but I don't think I'd be as
many times.
Yeah,
and the problem that comes up is you dive in, you dive out, you control the fight, and you just pick a guy and you just take him out one at a time over and over and over again. It's the same geometry that we have in live with the Hornets. So what happens in live with the Hornets?
They run away.
Right. They run away and they what? They engage together, they run away, they engage together, they pick a guy, they run away. Obviously, in live, we have a lot more space to move, so there's a lot more dynamics, there's a lot more skill expression, to the point where there's so much skill expression that it blocks out large portions of the community, because most people, like, you have to basically become a professional pilot to be able to fly in Star Citizen's model now. And for me, I've always argued, like, look, let's bring the game to a place where most people can enjoy it, but still keep that skill expression, skill ceiling. And again, it's a lot based on the ratios. But the same thing that's happening in live, where Hornets attack together because they have the highest acceleration and some of the highest top speeds, doesn't matter if their turn rates are slower. It doesn't matter if their guns are this. It doesn't matter, because if I can engage you and you can't engage me, then it's my fight to win. And we have the exact same thing going on in master modes where, yeah, sure, you got your turn rates and light fighter, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not taking turn fights with a light fighter because I don't need to. So I just fly in, shoot at them, and leave. And if you drop your chaff cloud and do whatever and sit in your fart screen for however long you want, great. All power to you, man. I'm gonna wait for you to blast all your chaff away, and then I'm gonna come in anyway. So it's the same geometry. You have the same strategies going on, and only interceptors now have access to this kind of strategy. And to me, it's very clear that interceptors in all kinds are just going to completely dominate. They've become the light fighter meta that we've seen in live. It's just been offset to a different ship. Now it's a tuning. It's like now, like, welcome to the light fighter meta, but now it's called the interceptor meta. So nothing's changed, but everything's changed. Is that kind of tracking?
But like I wouldn't discredit the entire master mode's experience down to an imbalance of like some of the speed interceptors and like snub fighters, right?
No,
Like
that's not
I
what I'm
think
saying.
it's
But that's
okay.
what the
Then keep
meta.
going.
That's what the meta is, right? So I want
Yes,
there to be a place where light fighters are a genuine threat to a bunch of
agreed.
interceptors coming in and blasting, but not at the expense of dropping the gameplay and the skill, so that you just gut the interceptors. Like, oh, they're outside their role, so let's just gut them.
Sure.
What I don't want to see is ships pigeonholed so strictly into these
Sure.
roles that there's no room for skill expression. So like I've said this on stream, like in this one, maybe why people get me all twisted up. Like, all A1 just wants to fight everyone in a prospector and show his EP. Well, that's an ignorant way of like manipulating what I'm trying to say. I use an example where I say, like, if I'm in an Aurora, right? Like I'm in just a regular little Aurora, I should be able to kill a rookie to average pilot in something like a Super Hornet if I'm in an Aurora. In master modes, like, there's not a chance in hell. Like, it's just not going to happen. No matter how good you are, I mean, as long as a person has a basic level of understanding of how to aim, the chance that you're getting through that weapons on a Hornet is just, like, I'm just not seeing it, right? And we see it happening over and over again with these ships being pushed into these roles, and they're doing it so strictly because they've dropped the speed so much that the room that you could move around and manipulate the fight is gone, because now you can't create enough of a deflection angle to get away from the ridiculously fast guns. You can't get far enough away to manage the fight because they're just hailstorming bullets at you. So it's a moot point. And then God forbid you have like a second shooter on you. If you have a second shooter, like, you can't even defend against that. And that's what I've been arguing. It's like, I should be able to take a 2v1. I'm not saying I want to kill both these guys. I want to defend against them. I want to be able to not die for a reasonable amount of time so I can set up my friends and set up a team environment. And the only ships that seem to like be capable of doing that are the interceptors.
So Vergjl, okay, go ahead, because
Like,
you mostly fly the Gladius and seem to be enjoying it, but still have mentioned the imbalance of the interceptor meta, I guess.
Yeah, like when I'm flying the Gladius, it's purely distress test, like the most you can do in it, right? Like
Okay.
it's the most maneuverable ship, and stuff like that. I am of the understanding that like when I play it, I'm playing it on hard mode because that's what it is right now, right? Like it's not like Avenger mentioned, it's not tuned that great.
But it's also the
So
ships that you two would probably be preferring to fly, like, on 1.0 release of the game, right? The style of ship that the dogfighters want to be flying are the light fighters, would be my guess.
yeah, just because that archetype's described as agile. So
Exactly.
yeah, like
It's
yeah,
the most
that's where the
skill
ceiling's gonna be
expression
the
and
highest.
all that stuff
Yep.
that you guys are talking about could potentially be,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, and so like I think and to answer your question, I think it's to loop back at what we said at the beginning of the podcast, Avenger, I think that I think all these issues that you're describing and a lot of issues that we're going to be talking about later is a direct correlation with the like gunnery. I think that the fact that you can boom and zoom as easy as you can, it has to do with the ease of offense. I think the fact that you can third party so lethally and so freely is because of the ease of offense. The fact that you can shoot at a hammerhead at 4K while I can barely shoot you at 1, is because of the
I
gunnery.
hit so many more shots now, and it's like
Yeah, and they
very
want
noticeable.
But and that's the problem, right? Is like that's also a good thing,
Yeah.
like because a lot of people play the game, they pick up sticks or whatever, they start shooting at a target, and this is at our fault, right, Avenger, because we want it to be less weapon dependent. But the problem is the general experience is that people hop in, they go to PvP, and they'd be lucky that they got 5 shots out of 200 to hit, right? So they needed to make people feel like they could actually get into a ship and start shooting at people reasonably. The problem is they, I think the general consensus of the people wanting the ceiling to go higher is that they overdid it, right?
So
Now, if
hold
I
up.
was the third party, just quickly, if I was the third party, you and live, the circumstances I would need to do, and this will help you understand the debate, Mike. I would
Okay.
have to merge on you with the speed, and the variation of speed is 0 to 1200, right? So I've got to get on the scale and match Avenger's distance. So I have to merge onto him, which means I have to manage my drift and my speed all the way up to the approach with him. And then I have to sit within 600 meters and then stay on target and shoot him, and then get ready to follow the trajectory in which he runs away. Right? Like that is like 3 steps of skill that you've got to do to third party someone and get a kill. In master modes, yeah, nah. Look at the guy, get within 4K, and you're starting your adventure already. And then
Yeah.
you get within 2,000, and you're already banging that guy up. And then you get within 1,000, that guy's cooked. Right?
Starting your adventure. I like that.
So the problem is, right, is it's so like if getting managing to third party and like merge with someone was it was on the scale of 10 difficulty, it's now like it's 2 now. Like it's so easy to be extremely lethal from a third party perspective, and in fights because of the gunnery. Now the problem is that's also a good thing for the casual player base. That's why the skill floor is accessible now, right? But I think the balance is
Yeah, where's
that
that
it needs to be
balance?
probably halfway. Like, and if that's where I would want to shake the hands of Yogi at. It's like, hey, the gunnery is great because you've got a lot of people playing and they're enjoying it and they feel special and powerful in their ships finally. They finally feel like they're a part of playing the game. But you kind of overdid it. Let's shake our hands halfway. And for that, for me, it would be like, cutting the assist maybe in half, cutting the range, which I find to be the worst part of it, in half, maybe even less. Now I'll let you go, Avenger. But that, just quickly, that would be my answer to your complaint, right? Is that I think that they brought the ship speeds down, they brought the ranges of combat down, or the fights are compact and stuff. And then the whole reasoning for this was to shorten the distance of these fights and these engagements. But then for some reason, the weapon ranges got quadrupled, even
Doesn't
8
make a lot of
times.
sense, right?
So now you don't need to gap that distance a lot of the time, and it's not as black and white in that, because you can't like cone of fire, so you're tickling people at those long distances and stuff. But that is like, I think the ultimate problem here, right, is that the gunnery didn't make sense against the master modes pitch. Like they don't go hand in hand, really. It's like the gunnery is a bit contradicting of the master modes pitch, I find.
And like
Avenger,
Avenger
you go.
said,
So
we don't
let
even
me-
have the worst of it yet with precision mode.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's why I think it's in here. I think some guy.
Okay, hold up.
proposed
So
precision,
I'm
and then
yeah,
go
I'm
for it.
I gotta throw this out there because precision mode. So Vergjl's absolutely right. It is based on the ratio. You nailed it, right? And let me give you an example about ratio here in a second. But we haven't even get started on precision mode. I mean, if you have weapons that can touch you at 4,000 meters, like why would I ever get close to you? Like
Yeah.
I have no reason to get close to you. And even in a world where they say, well, we're going to reduce weapon damage at range. Okay. Well, then I find the range that I can still hit you. I'm close enough to do the most damage, and I just shoot the crap out of you. So you either have 2 choices, in my opinion. In my opinion, you really only have one choice, right? And that is to reduce the range based on your power management / power plant. If you have a size 1 power plant, your guns go to 1,000 meters. End of story. If You have a bigger power plant, your guns can push farther because you can push more power to your guns, blah, blah, blah. And if they say, oh, it's unrealistic, well, look, folks, we walked away from realism a long time ago. So unless you want to get on the fucking soapbox and start talking about realism, like let's keep our head in the game and let's get to a point where multi-crew ships actually are fun and engaging. As
an idiot that doesn't really know everything about okay, so your example would be, all right, light fighters range is this because they'll have size 1 power plants. There's some medium fighters that might have size 2 components, right? How would that change? How,
so
like,
they
just
can,
from your
so they
example.
can
give them more range. Yeah, give
them a bit more range. Again, now you're adding characteristics.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad because they don't move the same way, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, look, I don't like having long range weapons on fighters because they want closer fights. They want cinematic close range fights. Like they keep on saying, look how close you are. Look how great it looks. I'm having consistently longer range fights in Master Mode unless I'm third partying, which means I just get right up behind you and just shoot the crap out of you. But guess what? I do that in live too. So, because they've reduced our geometry options, right? Now, for a layman's terms, is if I'm in space, I can move anywhere I want to go, right? And so if I catch the merge, like Vergjl was saying, if I match your speed and I get up to you, I can go in front of you, behind you, above you, below you. I can go anywhere I want to go around you. So while we're tumbling through space, we're spinning around, right? I can't do that in Master Modes. I get forced into a cone and then I have to pull, and I can only move like this as I chase you. Because if I try to move around you, if I try to go under you, if I try to lead turn you and cut around, I hit a speed wall. Or if I change the nose direction of my ship because we're now flying in an egg, I'm now forced to slow down because I'm now sliding on my side. So if I try to get around you and get an angle, it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, and the issue was the tumbling in space part. For me, that was the problem, was how fast we were tumbling was a speed that was... It just made everything so... I did not want to engage in dogfighting. I hated it. It was the worst experience ever. So now it's about making the experience of tumbling slower interesting, right? That's the issue that we have here.
Right. Well, look, you cannot have a space 6 degrees of freedom dogfighting game without doing some tumbling. I mean, we still tumble in Master Mode.
Technically,
to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So let me give you this ratio, right? To touch on the gunner thing, and we'll talk about how it affects tumbling, all that stuff. Just because I want to talk, because I'm talking directly at Mike in this sense, because I want to explain this to Mike, because Mike represents a large portion of the player base that I understand. I hear you. It's like
into it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you're a new player in a sense. Right. So let me explain the ratio here, and you could tell me whether you think this would be easy or not. Do you remember the Tachyon cannons the Band of Defender came out with when it first came out? What were they?
How did I forget? I came in second in Fight or Flight because of those stupid cannons.
What were they?
They were hit scan.
What is hit scan?
Where your pip is, it automatically hits.
Right. Is there any...
second you click your mouse.
Okay. What was the range? That was like 2,000 meters or whatever, right? Did you ever miss a shot when you were gimbling?
No, of course not. Yeah.
How difficult was it to hit the target for you?
Super easy, obviously.
Okay. Do you feel like that was fun gameplay? Were you excited about that for a long time?
Absolutely not. It was the dumbest idea of all time.
Why was it dumb?
Because there was... Even though they were low damage, well, at the time they were actually pretty high damage, I think, when they first came in. But
yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they were pretty nasty. But yeah, it just totally broke everything and took what was interesting about the game outright. There was no skill, obviously. Like, it was not enjoyable whatsoever.
Yeah, you brought a gun to an archery competition.
Yeah, or a sniper rifle. Just like super.
So let me give you an example here. We have what speeds in Master Modes right now, roughly?
In Master Modes, what, 300 meters per second?
Average speed is around 300, right? Yeah. In terms of you add the boost speed, you could argue, boost speeds go up, but you're not staying there consistently for whatever, right? So usually around 300. Okay, now, what speeds do we have in live? 1,200 something with 1,400 meter per second guns. So we only had about 20% faster guns in terms of the relative speeds. In Master Modes, we have 10 times the velocity of the weapon relative to the speed. So you could have 2,000 meter per second weapons like in master modes at 200 meters per second is the same as if you had live model with 1,200 meters per second with 10,000 meter per second weapons, which is basically hit scan. So we have basically gone into a hit scan model relative to the ratio between the movement capability of the fighter and the hit ratio. That's why people are hitting so much more. Is because, yes, there is still pip deflection, but the speed at which the ship can maneuver itself away from that deflection is basically it's basically not there. You know, yes, some of the better pilots can avoid a little bit of damage, and to a rookie pilot, they're not going to hit shit no matter what. I mean, you could literally lead them to it. They're not going to hit stuff. That is a skill that has to get developed. Obviously, from my point of view, being 10 years on the game, playing the game for a long time, my skill has been developed to a point where it's become second nature to me. I don't even think about it. It just happens, right? I realize that it's going to be a lot easier for me to pick up the system because I was at this little skill ceiling and now they've dropped it. So I'm going to be at the max of whatever that new skill ceiling is. And I'm going to be like, it's always going to feel like I'm taking a loss. My personal feelings have nothing to do with this. Right? What's healthy for the game is what matters. I'm totally fine with taking a skill loss, right? And people try to put me in this pigeonhole all the time and say, oh, you just want to keep your advantage and this and that.
Yeah, I've seen that comment a lot.
It's not true. Like that is such an ignorant, arrogant thing to say. It's like, it's so devoid of nuance and devoid of the truth.
You're not going to have a game
disgusting.
if that's the case anyway. Like, well, guys, you fight the same 50 people for the last 10 years. It's not
boring.
going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, and I don't want that.
Like, you guys both run organizations. Tell me
yes.
that you guys have not created drama with each other just to get fights. Like, that is the PvP community as in a nutshell. Like,
yes.
manufacturing drama just to fight each other because there's nobody to fight. It's like, from the outside, that's what it looks like. It's crazy. To think that you guys would want to have the skill ceiling so high that nobody could participate is the dumbest thing possible because you won't have a game, period.
I won't have a game. And again, I love this game. I genuinely love this game. It's unlike any experience I've ever played. And you know me, Mike, I've played Eve. I've played all these other games. Like I've played Squadrons and blah, 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 whatever. I love this game. And I love what it can be. I love its potential. I love, the fact that the devs are willing to listen, for the most part. Maybe not so much on that one. But the point is, if we want the game that is mass accessible to people, right? There is a way for us to have it without, how do I say it this way? Gutting what's really great about the experience.
What's great?
So in my opinion, what's great about the experience is the fact that you do have full control of your ship. It is a 6 degrees of freedom game. Space fighting is fighting in space, unlike a lot of other experiences. Now, obviously, it's not super realistic, but it's believable enough that you really feel like, yeah, this could, if you were to imagine like, yeah, fighters fighting in space, like, yeah, it kind of probably would look like that. It's that Battlestar Galactica kind of sliding through space, engaging because you're in space, In the live model, that was the experience. And in my opinion, it's like, so let's take what worked in the live model, what felt good, and let's bring it down on the speed spectrum. Because it's funny, I was arguing for lower speeds in live all the time. I'm like, give us 500 meters of speed in live. And now I'm arguing for higher speeds in master modes, but it's I want to be very specific when I say this. In SCM, you don't have enough speed and deflection to make any meaningful movements to avoid fire because the guns are just oppressively fast and it doesn't work, right? It's all aim and the movement is basically like it's a joke. Like nothing's getting away from fire. So now it becomes a game of, on paper, I do this much DPS, I do this. That's EVE Online. That's what it is. It's like my Drake does 1,200 DPS with kinetic weapons. Okay, this guy's going to come in. His Vanguard's going to do this. And so we're going to kill him in 5.3 seconds. And boom, let's primary this guy. And it's just going to go from one guy to the next.
I think that example's so extreme, but I do understand what you're saying. Because you still
I can
to hit. But
yeah.
Yes.
But let's be honest.
EVE the fighting is automatic, right? Like you're not actually aiming. So it's like, I think people take that example and are like, okay, he's limiting the experience down so much that they get worked up by that, by calling it EVE 2.0 or whatever.
Right. Right. And again, I don't want to sound like a prick here, but it's, if you have an absolute rookie player, he's going to come in, he's not going to hit 100% of his shots. And so
No.
people say, well, that's not entirely true. Yeah, but here's the thing, guys. And this is always going to be the case. We just tested 400 person servers on a single shard? Okay, with higher people, do you think there's going to be more or less instances of piracy in PvP?
Obviously more.
Okay.
Well,
If the server tick rates start going up and there's stuff to fight over like player bases, is there going to be higher or lower instances of PvP?
Obviously more. That's like the dream here.
Right. So if we're playing a multiplayer game, we need a system that caters to the multiplayer experience in a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
Would you not agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. So if we're going to make combat exciting and engaging and close range, well, then let's make it that way and not increase weapon speeds and velocities so high that it has the opposite effect in order to get people from the low skill ceiling, the entry level, to a place where they can effectively engage and actually put damage on target.
Well, let me jump in here, if you don't mind, to try to get Vergjl involved a little bit more, just for a moment. I think what I'm hearing is a lot about the guns. But we know from watching your content, some of the things that you've said, Avenger, is that speeds are also important to you as well, or the ability to maneuver a little bit more than what we currently have would make it more interesting. But is there a way, is there a world in which this works if they just fix the issues with the guns? And could that still, will it be more interesting? Will it improve on the problems that you guys have just if we did that on its own and left the speeds as it is? I was very adamant about, when people started losing their minds about the 500 meters per second comment that you made in your videos, that why not just try it? Just try some things. It doesn't hurt. And like, there was developers in the chat that said we did try it internally, and I'm like, okay, but you're you and we're us, and I think the community is very good at finding all the issues with everything a lot better than their internal testing, even though they have very good pilots in their internal tests as well, right? So Vergjl, like, just to have you jump in and then Avenger obviously respond to it, because I kind of cut you off in the middle. Is it possible to just fix the issue with the guns and have that experience that is interesting positionally? Or does something still need to be changed speed-wise or acceleration-wise or whatever the term is to make the flight skill ceiling where it needs to be for you guys?
Yeah. So like the answer for me for that is I think that, and this is probably where me and Avenger disagree. I think that the gunnery
he'll be
system
able
in
to
this
respond.
game needs to bow to flight, right? Like, I don't think that we should be designing flight based off of weapons. I think we should be
The other way around.
designing weapons based off of flight, right?
Okay.
And that's the problem. And I think Avenger's frustration with this too, and a lot of the sweaty high ceiling pushing community has their frustrations, is the insane ease of the weaponry has created really lazy flight, is like a good way to explain it, right? It's like you can fly really lazily without a lot of effort, because the guns gap the distance you need anyway, right? So like in live, where you would have needed to fly up to your target, now you don't. You can just shoot at range, and stuff like this. So I think that if they do reduce the gunnery, finally it gives the flight some room to flourish and actually grow, and for us to see its potential, right? Like, when you look at this flight model, it's important to say that, like, everybody preaches, and you and me have been in, gosh, probably more than 5 podcasts talking about this, Mike, where everybody talks about wanting the 2.6 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the 2.6 days, they had, stronger lateral strafes. They had closer to 6 DOF movement and stuff. And it's important to note that we didn't have as much 6 DOF in live. It was heavy forward thrust centric and stuff like this. They had slower, back strafes, etc. Now, if we are to try and even capture that experience again, which is the entire goal of master modes, right, is to bring back flight and maneuverability, then yeah, like, the guns need to be brought into line. And I worry that, like, what's the reasoning for these huge weapon ranges? Was it like, is it some, mission in Squadron 42? Was it
100%.
some guys, yeah, was it some guys pitch for precision mode or something? Like, why are they attached to the speeds? I'm very confused about, sorry, the weapon ranges. I'm very confused about that. And I just want to play a little devil advocate for the weapon speeds. Just keep in mind, the more you move that dial, the more a direct response of that, or the counterweight to that, is an increase in things like wiggling, hit registration, networking, stuff like that. So just keep in mind, like,
What do you
the
can
high
you go
weapon speeds.
can you
Go ahead.
go into that a little bit more? Because I watched a wiggle on Vergil's one of Vergil's videos. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I never. It's been a long time since I've seen a pip that hard to hit. So can you explain to people who don't know what you're talking about here and bring it down to my level a little bit?
Yeah, so like the weapon speeds and the gunnery system. So in Avengers Defense, it's not just the weapon speeds, right? It comes down to ESP, pitch
Yeah.
versus your turn rate, stuff like this. But there's a huge issue with this game, in case anyone hasn't noticed, where if you want to give ships the ability to thrust and have acceleration and maneuver around in sixth off, then people can weaponize that and wiggle their ship, left and right. They can fly without purpose besides just trying to annoy you and be hard to hit at.
Okay.
I've seen I've seen I've seen a Vergjl like throw his camera away because he's run into people doing that, and I tell you what, I sure as hell have done that too.
You want to wiggle?
So
Let's wiggle.
I could, yeah, I can relate. I can relate. In fact, I'm very sure that me and Avenger have gotten into an argument in DMs about each other wiggling. Okay, so like it's a
I
very
yeah.
prominent issue.
Well, fuck you. Well, fuck you. Stop wiggling at me.
You want to wiggle? I'll show you wiggle. But the point being, right, is a lot of the weaponry and the gunnery changes have the capability to hide the ugly aspect of playing an MMO, right? Like, so wiggling, bad networking, hit registration, stuff like that can be disguised with good gunnery. And then the problem is it's a ratio, right? Like, if the gunnery is too good, then it also suffocates good gameplay. So my only, just being the devil's advocate on that debate, Avenger, was just be careful of how far we slow down these weapons, because it makes hit registration more prevalent. It makes hitting someone's pip less reliable. It makes networking more of an issue, stuff like that.
So then,
but go ahead.
so then we reduce the range.
Yes.
Yeah,
because
if we're
obvious one.
closer, then
Yeah.
your ships hit more often, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
where are you guys engaging in live? I'm pretty sure it's in like the 500, 800 meter range,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, live.
It's like,
yeah.
it's like 500 if they're moving around, like 1,000 if they're going in a straight line. But yeah,
Yep.
like you'd be rarely would you be shooting outside of 500. But in master modes, gosh, it could be, if it's a big target. So like, to credit Avengers point, if you and 5 friends are shooting at a hammerhead, you could do it at 4K and you're not missing a single bullet, because that cone of fire is going to hit every shot of that cone of fire is going to hit the hammerhead, because it's so big, it's soaking all of the the rounds. So yeah, like I think the gunnery is a massive issue. I think it needs to be brought into line. I'm not sure why it is where it's at, but I also can relate to new players wanting to get in the master modes and have a gunnery that makes sense and it includes them. It doesn't frustrate them. So it's a careful balance between, we want the ceiling to be high. We don't want the gunnery to suffocate and snuff out flight. We don't want it to create lazy flight. We want to see the fact that we have increased speeds and accelerations on laterals and more maneuverability than we've had since 2.6. But we can't see that because the gunnery just shortcuts it anyways.
Yeah.
So
and
yeah, I think, like, to judge master mode's flight, we must first nerf the weaponry, and then we're going to actually see people flying for the first time, and then I think we can start talking about, what do the speeds look like, where does this need to change,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And Avenger, I can hear
because
you're
you can-
coming what? Let me jump in one
He's gonna
second.
blow.
Yeah, let me jump in
for it.
1 second though, because the hammerhead example I'm struggling with just a tiny bit. There was a developer response on Spectrum. I don't know if you guys saw it, and it was around specifically to your video, Avenger, and it was about Maelstrom.
Armor will fix it, right?
Maelstrom will fix it. So
Yeah,
that's
fucking
one of those,
bullshit.
Well, maybe not. It's hard to say. Well, we don't know. And
Well, let me explain it to you.
Okay.
I'm going to stop this because this makes me genuinely upset.
Go for it.
Because it's such fucking malarkey, right? And I hear this whole Maelstrom will fix it, Maelstrom will fix it. If I can hit you and you cannot hit me, who's going to win that fight?
Well, what if it doesn't do damage, or if it does such little damage, it would take 30
all
minutes,
right,
40, an hour,
Brainiac.
whatever.
Okay. Use your Omega brain here and figure this one out.
I don't have
You have
one.
you have an Ares Ion, right?
Yeah,
Okay. Is the Ares Ion going to kill with a size 7 gun?
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can hit you and you can't hit me and I have an Ares Ion, am I going to win that fight?
Could they tune that ship then later to be? I know
Okay.
it's kind of insane, but
So
like,
do
that
size
ship-
5s have a chance to kill a hammerhead? Do size 4s have a chance to kill a hammer? Guess what has size 4s? 2 talons, right? So can you hit a talon? Is the talon smaller than a hammerhead?
Could they tune those ships to make it so they have to be closer to
You
the ship?
cannot tune geometry. I am physically smaller than you. The only option you have is to reduce my range. Because if I'm at long range and I'm shooting, you cannot hit me and I can hit you. If I'm at 2,000 meters and I'm making movements and your velocity on projectiles is the same as mine, that ratio means I'm going to exist in a zone where I'm always unhittable. That
I
is a
understand.
geometrical issue.
I understand.
Armor will not fix that. And we have always, like, this whole this debate here is the gunnery has to get to a point where I cannot exploit that geometry to the point where I can just stay at range and be like, look at this hammerhead. He can't do nothing. There could be 20 or 100 people on your ship. It doesn't matter. And the bigger the ship, the longer I can stay at range because you're not going to hit me.
Just
So
to intercept here real quick.
Go
So
for it, and then I'll jump in.
just to help the viewers out, Maelstrom, you're referring to armor.
Yes.
Like, okay. Yeah. So
And
people might have not made that connection.
And this isn't my opinion either. It kind of is, actually. I think in some cases we unfortunately have to let these guys cook, because I think what Vergjl was saying is I don't understand why they're doing these weapon ranges, and I think it's very obvious that we're getting the Squadron 42 flight model for now, and they're going to have to build, unfortunately, the PU flight model for us as we go based off of the feedback that you guys are giving, right? So this is very valid feedback that Avenger is giving. I'm not devaluing it because there's something in the future that should resolve that stuff. The other Star Citizen developer responses that they've talked about in master modes, very, very briefly, and chat, or you guys can please correct me if I'm wrong, but they talked about wanting the ability to, even though there's a size 5 weapon on a certain ship or a certain turret or something like that, that they can adjust those based off of the ship to make the archetype fit the roles that they wanted them to. So that was like the only thing I was going to say about that, about the size 7 or size 5 example. And I'm only asking if you think that can work. I'm not asking I'm not saying that's the right solution or anything.
But that is, they're going to change the archetype, and they're going to do one of two things. They're going to reduce the range because it becomes an issue with the range control.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we have to get to a point where forever kiting is a thing of the past. And in order to do that, gunnery must change. Now, if we continue with the same gunnery system where we have PIP systems, which personally for me, I think we should consider. Let's run this thought experiment for a second.
Here we go.
Right?
Here we
Okay.
go.
I don't know what's happening, so Vergjl seems to know.
Careful on the time. Careful on the clock. Okay, just make sure we keep looking at the clock. Okay.
No.
I'll cut him off if
No, we're good.
if it
We're
goes
good.
too
we're
long.
good.
Okay.
I know where
So you
he's
guys-
going.
Okay, so
wanna keep the conversation
we're
going.
pushing to a more arcadey style of game. Is that correct?
In some ways, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But
So
I would debate that arcadey means it makes sense. Like, I
Okay.
would debate that.
I think
that's
people
what they
use
would
Arcadia
call
as a negative always,
Okay, let me-
and it maybe
okay.
isn't always negative, right?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But can we agree on CIG wants a closer range game, correct?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
they want us
for
to
sure.
see their pretty ships, I think, more
Right.
than anything.
Okay. Okay. So there's lots of ways that we can do that. Are we allowed to use examples where this ratio has already been done and the close ranges are already done? Can I show an example of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you something here.
Just be careful not to go down this route for an hour.
No,
No, I
That's
won't
all
let
I'm
it.
saying.
That's why I'm here. I'm here to have you
so
guys
do
talk
you
to each
see
other. But
do you see what I see on the screen here?
yes,
Holy
yes.
shit.
Okay, so this is an example of a game called Star Wars Squadrons, which again, the distances here 700 meters. You look, there are no lag or lead pips, okay? It's a true aim gunnery system. Hold on, right? I'm not saying we go Star Wars Squadrons. What I'm saying is look at the way that they've done their gunnery system. Look at, they have fixed assist working. Look at the bullets will bend like he targets, and his bullets will kind of bend towards the target a little bit. So the pixels that he has, and again, this is played with controller, mouse, keyboard, joystick, you name it, right? So once he gets his little crosshair in the box, the relative difference between weapon velocity and ship speeds is around the same we have kind of in master modes, where we have really high weapon velocities to the speeds of the ships, okay? But because we don't have a lag or a lead pip, he's at 900 meters there. He's not shooting. Because if he starts shooting at that range, he doesn't have a pip, so he's got to use his eyeballs and get close enough to actually score a kill. So he's at 400 meters there when he got that kill, because he's actually physically seeing the target and looking at it and going, okay, I need to aim here to hit the target, right? And he doesn't have to lead, he doesn't have to make a massive lead angle here. He just has to lead it just enough to actually get on target. And I think if we had a better gunnery system, look, all the things that they're wanting in master modes are being expressed in this. You want the chase dogfighting here. Look, without boosting, my ship is able to actually get into a bit of a turn here. He's avoiding a bit of fire. Like, these are all great examples of a gunnery system that's not utilizing the lag lead pip system. Is that
I mean, I'll let
Go ahead,
Vergjl.
Just pause it real quick. So he's referring, go back to it if you could. He's referring to, like, there's no pip in this, which means that you're gonna have to shoot at your target to start measuring, okay, now I need to lead it a bit more, I need to lead it a little bit less. So, like, my only issue with this is you're having to shoot your gun just to measure, okay, like, and you're hopefully not hitting something else, stuff like that. You're hopefully not engaging the station. It's fine. I'm not really left or right when it comes to the pip thing. Like, I understand the debate, and he's just asking you to, do you think this gunnery looks better? One thing I'll counter this with too. Avenger, would you say that this is the best flight game like you've played?
It's definitely up there with some of the best feeling games I've ever played. Yeah, I used to play this in tournaments, and I mean, what we're seeing here is a pretty rookie pilot too. This guy's not really that good. Like, he's not drifting correctly. He's not lining himself up. He's totally unorientated. I mean, I should pull up some gameplay of me fighting in tournaments, because it looks much different.
Just quickly, Mike, do you think this looks fast enough?
Well, okay. I think speed is very much based off of the feeling. Okay, I feel fast as fuck Gravlev racing. I'm going 225 meters per second, right? So it just depended on what's on the screen. But what I will say based on the pip is it's arcadey what I'm seeing on the screen, but I think maybe not in the worst way possible, because it's probably more
it's insanely fun,
new player friendly to be like, just aim near this box, right? Versus hit this tiny circle. So I don't know.
What's important to know from this too is, like, these speeds are so low, right? Like, so this is like, it's also proof of concept that, speed is like completely relative, right? Like, the fact he's like waving around the stations, dodging around terrain, losing his opponent by trying to get line of sight.
Look, see how he leads. So like, just there, he was a little bit leading his target because he's looking at his shot. Like, he's adjusting for it. Like, I feel like it would add an element of skill to gunnery that would also be rewarding, because if you actually did score hits.
But it's also simple enough that the barrier of entry seems quite low, right?
Yeah, man. And it's all and again, look, in a 6 Degrees of Freedom game, you're not going to have the same, and even the boost mechanic in Squadrons is similar to to Master Modes.
It is
like,
fairly
similar. They took a lot of, I bet you any money they took some inspiration from this game, but they've got the ratio all wrong, dude. Like, they've got it all wrong. And because we have a pip system that adjusts for improper shots, then if this guy had pips, he'd be shooting at 1,000, he'd be shooting at longer ranges, because Like he'd just be looking at the little box and like he's not looking at his target. Like there's no actual gunnery being done. You're just looking at the pip and pulling it when the box turns green. Oh, monkey pull stick, fire trigger. You know, it's just you want this, like what's happening right now. You want to chase. You know, you want like actual proper gunnery that feels good. And in my opinion, it'll force like if again his range is about 1,000 meters. Like he can't shoot past 1,000 meters. You know, it forces fights to get closer.
Mechanic a little bit there.
Yeah, exactly like how you'd expect in master modes, right? So to me, it's, you know, and like they've even given us a asymmetrical flight cone so that they can, you know, oh, if we're gonna make fights this way, then we can get more. It's just, you know, if this is what they're going for, closer range fights, well, then we have to really like be serious about how gunnery affects the ratio between when I'm shooting, when I'm getting hits on target, all that stuff. Because if you can't see your target, why am I going to shoot on it? If you take the pip away, like I did this experiment on stream in master modes. I turned off my targeting and I was just looking at my target, and I didn't start pulling my trigger until around 600 meters at a long range shot, because I was like looking at the movement. I was like, okay, where do I aim here? But when I turn my targeting on, I'm at 1,200 meters and I'm seeing the pip. I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to pull onto it. And
I'll give an even funnier example. When I've watched people, and I've done this myself included, because you get so laser focused on the pip. I've watched people start shooting at like 4,000 or 5,000 meters on live because you see the pip and the pip turns green, and or whatever, and you don't even realize that they're not in range, right? Because the pip is always there. So it's definitely an interesting thought experiment. That's for damn sure, because what is on the screen looks arcadey as fuck. And I don't mean it in a bad way at all, because it looks fun and it looks engaging for people. Now, there's the other side of that argument of you're in a bit more of a box. How does that work in the situations in the PU? But with the change between the difference between nav mode and regular,
hold up. When you say how does it work in the PU? Like unpack that for me, because in my opinion,
I was about to. You're good. You're good. We're in agreement. Because I think when you're in SCM mode or in nav mode, like you have to make the choice. So when fights start, they continue. It's not like this situation where the space is so big, I'm running all over the place and I'm so far away from you. Like I actually don't consider it problematic. It's I think with the idea of that we're in these two different modes, that we might be closer to each other, and fights stay fights and are not constantly people running and QTing away from each other and all this stuff that we currently have now, which would be the argument of, hey, things are different in the PU versus an arena commander situation.
CIG could have their cake and eat it too if they change the gunnery system.
So I think this is really interesting, because
they could have the high they could have the high speeds, they could have the low speeds on like high weapon velocities, so they could, you know, tone down the wiggling, all that stuff. They could have the low speeds so that they could keep fights closer, even though that may not be the effect that it's having right now. But they could have all that stuff if they take away the very, very. It's just such a, and then they want gimbals and this and that. And I'm just like, take gimbals off fighters. Like, just get them off. They don't, like, there's no reason to have gimbals on fighters. You got so much bloody fixed assist anyway. It's pretty much gimbaling for you regardless.
Yeah. Again, I'm hitting a lot more than I ever have. So that's a sign of when I'm hitting my shots, that's a sign that there's probably some tuning that needs to happen. And I'm not trying to put myself down, but it's definitely that when I've seen flight models or I guess gunnery models that it feels too good. I know the first fighter flight tournament that I did really well in, I did really well because we tuned my ESP perfectly for me. And that was it. That was the difference. I practiced for 1 hour. All we focused on was my ESP setting, and I killed everybody. Right? I didn't kill everybody. Noodle did most of the work, but I did enough to do the job because ESP was doing it for me. Right?
You killed Bergs and lost me all of my channel points, like all 600,000.
But it was because I was able to aim. So yeah, I think that I
Yeah,
thought
like,
we were
I
going to
don't
come in here and
really-
Avenger was going to be like speed, 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 speed. But what we mostly talked about was the guns, and that surprised me. And I think it was probably going to be refreshing to a lot of people.
Let's move on to the speeds, because honestly,
do
I
it.
don't really have a dog in this fight. Like, obviously, the ranges need to come down. Like,
Yep.
that's just the most obvious thing in the world, especially when it comes to the fighter gameplay. Like, they can use the malform, the armor argument, right?
Maelstrom, yeah.
I forgot the name. Yeah, Maelstrom. They can use that, but that's great for a hammerhead, but it doesn't solve the rest of the issues, right? Anyways, so it's kind of irrelevant to our point. As for the pip, I kind of like the pip being there, but I don't like it being as important as it is, and I don't really have a dog in the fight when it comes to that. Like, I can play both sides, so it's not a big deal. I would worry about the idea of shooting your guns just to get a taste of the accuracy of it. I'm gonna try and get this guy in the head, but I'm gonna shoot a couple rounds to make sure, I'm aligned with the head properly. It's just, I find that aspect of it a bit funny, but
Hold up. I just want to push back on that a little bit because
sure.
I've used that gunnery system you saw in that for thousands of hours. And I can tell you right now, after you start getting good with that gunnery system, you know where that shot's going. Like, right? So
yeah, but for me, it's just the act of, like, you need to shoot first to even measure.
But Vergjl, that is World War II gunnery. Like, we have been told so many times. Chris is like, I want that World War II dogfighter. I have all these books on dogfighting, this and that. Well, guess what? World War II dogfighters don't have a lag lead pip system. They don't have a computer system on board that extrapolates the advanced movement of ships in real time in 3D and then give you a solution. Like, World War II dogfighters. Yeah, but it's just like, like I said, we've walked away from realism. If we want, the problem I find is that people have this concept. They're like, oh, if we're in the future 2900, surely we would have a HUD system. I mean, for God's sake, guys, surely if we were in 2945, we'd have drones. Nobody would be in a fighter. So it's like, at what point are we going, we're going to sacrifice? I mean, they literally just talked about it on the last ISC, the FPS guy.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, why do lasers have recoil? First of all, it's not a laser because it's hit scan if it's a laser. There's no velocity. It's lights, right? And second of all, if you're using recoil, it's because there's physical matter being fired from your weapon. So it's a plasma weapon. It's not a friggin' laser. Like, use your brain for 2 seconds. But people are complaining about, oh, why do laser guns not have recoil and stuff? And it's just like, look, because it feels better, because it's more fun, because that's how FPS games work. So why are we arguing about this? Like, get over it. Like, lasers have recoil. I mean, you play Halo, those laser guns have recoil. Everyone likes Halo. So in my opinion, it's like, look, flight gunnery 3D shooters have been really great since the 90s. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel with this weird ass pip system where it's like, you want to be DCS in space and have pips? Well, then be DCS in space and have pips. The reason pips work is because the ships fly in a predictable fashion that you can actually get a gunnery solution on. And every great pilot who can fly an F-15 in DCS or any ships like that or planes like that, they're not actually looking at their pip that much. Like, they're using it as a guidance tool, but they're looking with their eyes to see if they can catch that target. But the distance and the velocity and the rate fight and how much ships can move around and create deflections in DCS are infinitely smaller than what you'd expect in the 6 Degrees of Freedom game. Because in 6DUF, I can look at you and I can move based off your angle. I can't do that when I'm chasing in a 2-circle fight. Again, these concepts are a bit difficult for people who don't have flight experience. I think you've already tuned out at this point, right? But you got to understand, like, if you're playing a game that's a 3D shooter, you have to understand that stuff has been figured out in the past, and that is gunnery. Games like Free Space that were incredible because they didn't have pip systems. Games like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, no pip systems. So there's a lot of stuff that works because the gunnery system works in tandem with the way that their ships are moving. If you want short-range fights that are up close and personal, you can't have pips because it's just too bloody easy to shoot out the little box that's moving around.
I never thought
all
we
our
would go down
suggestions,
this route, but I don't know.
Our suggestions, it's like, look, let's reduce weapon ranges because then at least it reduces the pip error. You can actually be accurate. It's not going to be over because you're getting people shooting at 2,000, 3,000 meters, and it's just oppressive, and we have this massive cone, so you're just pissing into the wind and just hitting everything.
I see a thing in chat, and it makes me really interested. It's very interesting. They go, so no pip to promote people to slow down and get closer. I think that would be automatically a result of it. Is it?
Well, of course, because you have to see the target.
Exactly. No matter what, it forces you to be close. It's very interesting. I'll say the least. And
yeah, I could agree to that. Like,
it's very
UI gameplay, UI only gameplay is horrible, right? Like, so.
And it's all guys.
Like,
as a noob, as somebody who doesn't do this like but second nature like you two do, I am 100% focused on the pip. And I remember I trained a little bit with Vergjl a while back, and I don't know, Vergjl, if you think I got okay or not. He was talking me up, but I don't know if he was just talking me up because
he was beating
nice.
guys in LR, Vergjl.
Was I?
He was. Yeah, really, you got that guy.
Yeah, but come on, he
just had to get it in, eh?
It was a new player.
Hey.
This isn't fair. He was a new player that just started playing Star Citizen. This isn't fair. So the guy had been training super hard. But the guy had been training super hard. So but I was getting like decent, but so Vergjl was really focusing on how I was flying when we were training, and then I talked to somebody else and they were like, yo, just aim. And that's all and once I just aimed, I was starting to actually kill people. And that because like when all I did was focus on the pip.
It was funny.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, okay. And again, I find this to be so interesting because that was the old flight model, and there's a lot of issues from you guys talking about how the guns are working, how fast they are, blah, 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 blah. And I think it would be very interesting if the pips went away, because I think naturally your brain would just make you like go down on the throttle, or it would create that scenario that they were looking for. That's
it's a way better experience. It's way better. Like, it's so much better because you're actually close enough to see. It's cinematic, like you're talking about. Plus, there's still aim skill and here's the thing: it breaks bad habits. Look, how many people do you, like? Let me ask you this question, Mike. When you were aiming, were you staring at the ship and looking at the flight path and extrapolating what's going on, or were you just staring at that little box and trying to get it on as quick as you could?
I was not lag pip. I was lead pip, and I think that answers your question, right? Is at the pip.
So you had your aim goggles on, and you were just like, find the box as quick as you can, find the box, right?
Exactly. And
that is terrible.
See where it's going. So no matter if we're closer and the beautiful ships are on the screen, I'm not looking at them anyway, right? And that's kind of the point here. That's really interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else to add to that.
At the very least, it gets you thinking. Like, what? Because again, me and Vergjl, like, we're arguing ratios and stuff. You know, if we're really interested in making the game cinematic and better, it's like there are options on the table for us to do that. The question is whether or not CIG is going to do it. I mean, they should try it. They should reduce weapon ranges. They could even increase weapon velocities, to be totally honest.
For you who did not, who didn't watch SCL, at the very end of it, they said nothing is off the table, and even addressed if you guys really feel that the flight speeds need to go up. He gave the example of 100 meters per second. I know yours is a bit higher in some of the videos that you said. That nothing is off the table. So they are willing to do, like, I think this is going to be a long process. I think you guys know that. And that's why you guys are making your videos, getting the feedback out there ASAP, because we want the process to be as short as possible, right? But to get to like a really good place. But go ahead, Vergjl.
Yeah, like, I don't have a dog in the fight, right? Like, I think the idea of getting people closer and looking at ships instead of UI elements is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer is get Bunton to make an experimental mode. That's my answer. But I'm going to be a great podcast host and move us on to the next aspect of master modes.
Let's go.
Because we've eaten 75% of the
minutes.
time and we've just gotten through guns. So...
Okay, so I didn't know there was more. I thought we came to like an agreement that guns were like the biggest problem, so I focused on that. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's a big issue. It's still, I think it's the biggest issue right now, but
shallow end of this. But yeah, it's the most prevalent issue. Like, I feel like MM can't reach its potential with the current gunnery. That's for sure. I think like there's not a single person that does that knows what they're talking about that doesn't agree with that. So, you know, but it's a slider, right? Like, you go too far the opposite way, then all of a sudden anyone that plays the game casually is having a horrible experience. So like, you got to find the balance, right, between what me and Avenger and the people who want the ceiling to come up with the people that are just getting in, so the skill floor. Yeah. So, anyways, to move on, because we should probably talk about the flight and the boost mechanics, right? Like the SCM versus boost shapes Avenger, because that's probably the next most important thing I think when it comes to master modes. So let's break that down. So when you're talking about speeds, okay, and the funny thing is, I think people were relating your argument, and even I was, up until you and me had the basically spoken on your stream. When you say you just want the speeds to come up, I also understand that you do want the overall speeds to come up. But a lot of your debate is bringing the SCM, which for the audience is unboosted, without boost, closer to the boosted ceiling. Right. Yeah. So the problem is a lot of people pigeonhole Avengers arguments into he just wants to slide around and survive forever again. And it's not necessarily the case. What
A
he's
lot of people
referring to
mention
is that,
backstrafing in that, right? I think.
yeah,
Okay.
yep, there's this, and I think what he is actually trying to describe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Avenger, but I think I've understood it, is that you are kind of pushing for the SCM's non-boosted speeds to be closer and a gradual progression when it comes to boosted. So to lift the inner circle of SCM combat up closer to the SCM boosted speeds.
So the boosted
Correct?
speed
Rather
wouldn't
than
go
just,
up.
yeah, I
Okay.
think, and I do understand, like, Avenger does want that too, to a degree, I believe, right? Maybe with some of the other archetypes. But, I think that is majority of his debate, to which, I'm completely open to as well. And you got to, and just so
It's
that
interesting.
the audience can visualize this, right? Right now, you play every archetype inside of two bubbles, right? The shape of those bubbles varies and changes, but you're in two bubbles. When you're not boosting, you're inside of one, and you can get to the wall and the edges of this bubble, right? And then you start to boost, and then you've got an even bigger bubble that you could extend to. Now the problem is a lot of people feel caged in that experience, and I just call it the two-speed system. And I think that Avenger might be leaning towards a unified speed, and instead of just tying the boost mechanic to purely acceleration within one singular bubble. Have I got it right, Avenger, or not? Go ahead.
I think there's two ways to solve this problem. If
Yep,
everything
me
is
too.
if everything's on the table, then so there's a game that me and some of the guys in AVS like to goof around with. It's a game called Rixer. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Yeah, yep.
Right. So Rixer is a 6 degrees of freedom dogfighting game that allows you to change the characteristics and the parameters of your flight model on the fly. So you can design in Rixor a asymmetrical speed ceiling like the egg we have with Afterburner as the default for, so basically what we did was we made master modes in Rixer. We had the speeds we wanted, we had the weapon velocities we were looking for, we had the asymmetrical speed cone, and in my opinion, it felt a hell of a lot better. Because what happens is if you have symmetrical speeds in 3 directions and only in the forward direction do you have a little bit more speed, you allow
Yeah, yep.
for the phenomenon where if the guy flies and tries to do the Starbuck where he spins around and starts shooting and you're closing on him, you're always going to close on him because you're not afterburning or boosting, because your ship natively should be able to reach that speed, right? Because now he's orientated towards you, you're pushing with your mains, so you're always going to close distance. It simulates what would happen in infinite space, where if we have no speed limit and I'm pushing on you with my main thruster, I'm going to push at 10 Gs and you're only going to be able to retro burn away from me at 5, which means I'm always going to close on you. So it's simulating that kind of, mechanic, but it's not being locked behind this ridiculous afterburner mechanic. Look, we have tried Afterburner years ago, and guess what? Nobody liked it. Nobody liked it. Well, why does nobody like it? Because you're playing a flight game and you have to hold a button all the time to like run against the speed, like the air and space. Like it's just terrible. Like it just doesn't feel good. So why don't we get rid of the afterburner mechanic entirely? Because there's two ways to do this. One, you adjust SCM speed. Like the less invasive way is to adjust SCM speed so that they're higher, so there's more room for you to actually exist in a dogfight, and that like I use this example all the time where I catch a merge on someone's flying past me. I see them coming towards me, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna start my back pedal here. I'm gonna spin my nose around, and I'm gonna move towards them. And as I'm moving towards them, then I come in behind them and catch them. That's a very difficult thing to do in the live model because I have to merge that speed at 1200, which is just massive. Whereas with master modes, it's basically 200 to like 400 depending on your boost speeds. But again, because I'm gonna have to merge at above 200, I can now only be facing the same way that he's going, right? And we have like low turn rates and all these things. It just makes merging basically impossible because it basically promotes jousting. It promotes people passing nose to nose and going over, passing again, because I don't have the speed anymore to actually start to merge with your speed and then turn around and engage you. Like I can't catch you, right? The only way I can catch you is by exposing my back and going the same way you're going. So it's like, it's a very, and again, it limits because I have to hold the boost button down just to keep up with you, right? And then when I finally do that and I get up, on speed, I first of all have to be in an interceptor. I cannot do this in a light fighter, which is a big problem, right? Because I don't have the speed. And I reach the speed instantly. The energy state that I reach is instant with the accelerations we have. So I have 600 meters per second in a buck. You have 500 something in an aftermurdering Gladius. Well, guess what? You will never catch me because the ratio between how fast you go and how fast I go is too big. So even if I catch the merge, even if I look at, oh, he's coming in and I could turn, it's like, doesn't matter because I'm never going to be able to stay on you long enough to do any kind of meaningful damage. I'm just going to annoy the shit out of you with my 2000 meter per second guns while I sit there holding the trigger on the little pip.
Do you remember the when the Carrack was the fastest ship and that's what everybody was using and nobody could ever pirate them because they just would get to top speed and you would never catch them? That's the one thing that I'm confused about is like the top speed of ships, and you guys, or what you were just saying now is I'll never catch you. How is that fun? That's the part that I've always been a little lost on. With every ship having a different top speed, what makes that interesting, or especially within the individual light fighter archetype, right? Or light fighter and interceptor sort of being like a Buccaneer is such a weird ship because it was supposed to be the Drake answer to the F7C.
I don't know.
Right? I think.
Yeah,
and then it ends up being this like super fast So everything is very weird where it has the gunnery capabilities of a Hornet, but the speed is faster than your light fighters. So maybe that's just the mistake altogether was like this interceptor idea. But yeah, that's like the one question I have where you said, I can never catch you.
Right, because they've pigeonholed the ships so they're so strict on the way they've pigeonholed these ships that you can't operate anywhere close to like outside of whatever your intended role is. Because they're trying to make ships meaningful, but instead what they've done.
And why?
Yeah. Yes, okay, so let me give you an example of a different game and see how you feel about this.
Okay.
So I use a game, for example, like because I have a lot of hours in this game, For Honor. Has you ever heard of a game called For Honor?
Yes.
Okay, now there are characters in For Honor. Some characters are heavies, some characters are assassins, some characters are vanguards, whatever, right? And the differences between the types of characters equates to how they fight. But every character can kill every character in a sense that if I play a heavy character, so I'm playing the warlord, right? I got a sword and a shield, right? I have benefits to being the warlord. I don't have to worry about certain types of block. I can block more stuff. My attacks don't do very much damage, but they're fast. Like there's different attributes to the way I fight, right? But every character can catch each other with a parry. Every character can attack. Every character has these basic fundamentals, right? And then once you start to get to know the character really well, you kind of understand the timings, then the expression of the character starts to come out. Okay. Now, that game, in my opinion, is much different than Star Citizen, but you need to understand the core philosophy here, where it's because each character has a role. Some characters are really good for doing this kind of thing. It's called creep clearing, right? So you go into the center of the map and you have a really big axe, so you swing really wide and you can kill the creeps a lot faster and it benefits your team, right? whereas some characters are assassins and they're very tiny and they're really hard to hit, and they kind of interrupt people while they're attacking. There's benefits to them too, and they're all working in tandem. They all have their place in the meta. In Star Citizen, basically we were playing it's as if we were playing one character.
Yeah, it was the light fighter forever.
Because the character that we're playing has an ability that no other character has, and that's a problem, right? Because in master modes, the ability for the interceptors to control the fight is at this level, and every other ship is around here. And what I'm arguing for is if we have higher SCMs, right, we're going to have that distance between the ships reduced so that the advantage to being an interceptor isn't so massive that it just snuffs out all the other kind of abilities for ships, right? Now, Vergjl may disagree a little bit on this depending on the way it's tuned, but we can agree that there is a very big disparity between the types of ships that they've put into these roles. Would you agree with that?
And it seems more specifically the issue with the light fighter versus the interceptor as well, right?
But the medium fighters are even worse because they're even slower and bigger, so they're easier to hit. So the only ship that kind of has a chance is the light fighter, and it's being left behind.
Okay,
go ahead, Verge. This is the problem. This is the problem, though. I think you advertised wanting this change really shitty because you were just like, increase the speeds.
Yeah, people hyper-focused on things.
Gosh, no, not the speeds, right? And instead, you're talking about reducing the difference in archetypes, right? Like, or like less. Oh, how do I put this? Less difference in the archetypes, which isn't a bad thing, right? It just depends on where you go on the dial. I would actually shake your hands absolutely on this because I believe that right now the light fighter kind of just doesn't have its place. It's more like a dueling ship. So I would want the speeds to come up because I don't believe that everything should get nerfed. I think that everything should get buffed to match great things about different ships, right? Like I hate the idea that if one ship is really great, then that ship should suffer and be brought into line with all the other ships that are suffering. So yeah, like I would agree. Bring maybe the speed of the Gladius closer towards the Buccaneer. But here's the counterpoint to this: if you go even Steven on all these ships with all these speeds on all these archetypes, then you get the problem of, okay, everybody just pick a Hornet Ghost. Oh, everybody just pick the Gladius.
Because then
every patch.
The best of the, because then the best in that given, because there aren't scenarios, right? Where
because the archetype separation isn't unique enough to justify having different compositions and different purposes. So it's a careful balance between wanting the ship to remain that archetype and that role, but also having enough balance that they can compete in each other in aspects.
Let's go back to the Hammerhead example then. How does that work within this? If we're bringing light fighters, because the example Avengers bringing up here is that everybody can kill everybody still, and I'm coming closer to that than I ever have through our conversations today, where I was very adamantly against that previously. I never thought a group of light fighters should. I thought it should just. Idris's and other ships sort of shrug them off in a way was my original thought process. But how does that work with the Hammerhead examples that we've talked about today, where how does the Hammerhead, or how does let's even try to bring it to the examples of some of the guys I'm seeing in chat say, well, they're only talking about combat. How does this come into play with, even though this is still a combat example, but more piracy, a cargo hauler, right? How do we make it interesting in that way, where if everybody's too close together, I feel like we get a lot of what we have now. Exactly what Verge is saying is, you just, now everyone's flying Hornet Ghost. Before it was arrows. What's going to be this patch, You
want people to bring like ship composition, so it's important for the archetypes to still capture that they are a role, right, and to be valid in that aspect. But it's also important, like Avengers said, for these roles to have enough flexibility to actually play against each other. So, like, the answer is there's somewhere in the middle between the speed ceiling of the other ships when it comes to the heavy, the medium, the light fighter, in comparison to the overpowered buck. and the snub fighter, so you could increase those speeds, and I would shake his hand on that. And the answer too is, if like we're talking about like 50 meters a second here. We're not
Yeah, we're
talking
not talking
about a
about huge.
lot, right?
Okay.
Like, yeah, so you give a hammerhead plus 50 speed, it's not the end of the world. Nothing changes really. Like we're talking about a small amount here in reality. And that's where I think a lot of people misunderstood Avengers' argument and kind of just shelved it the moment they saw it on the title. But the point being, I wouldn't want it to be a unified single speed, because I do think then we're just isolating it. The roles don't have enough separation, and it just does become which is the best ship. But I agree that the difference in the inability for them to compete with each other is an issue, because the separation might be a bit too brutal. Yeah.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
I think we're coming from the assumption that what we have in master modes is static, right? And I would
Mhm.
agree that if we are to have master modes the way it is now, with the power management the way it is now, with the afterburner the way it is now, give us lower velocities on projectiles by a bit, lower the speeds, let's fix these issues, let's reduce the ranges, let's do that stuff so we can actually get to a place where ships can be capable and that stuff, right?
Yep.
I'm arguing for higher SCMs and lower boost speeds.
Mhm.
To me,
Which
I
is
think
crazy. Hold on. Pause. Guys, he's talking about lowering the speeds here. Okay. Like, so where everyone's freaking out that he's saying, oh, get the speeds up to 600-700, he's talking about actually bringing them lower right now. Okay. So just understand that. Yeah. Like, so, where everybody, you know, disregards Avengers' opinion as I just wants plus 200, he's literally talking about bringing it down. The ceiling's down right now. Go ahead.
yeah, it with SCM speeds around 400, and whatever your SCM speed is, 150 above that is what your boost speed is. So if you're topping it at 400, then you're boosting maximum only in the forward direction at what is it, 150 so 400 so 550, right? So to me, it's all based on ratio. I think the ships in standard control mode should have the acceleration and the maneuverability to genuinely avoid fire. Because right now, the only way to avoid any kind of meaningful damage is to just leave the bubble, because you're not going to get away from the guns. And I think that's the huge issue, is they've made
what
the
does
ratios.
genuinely avoid fire mean versus pip wiggling or
Right. Why are we pip wiggling right now?
Yeah, to avoid fire. Right?
Because it's the only way to effectively avoid fire.
So
because
what's the difference? Explain the difference between you saying avoid fire and what pip wiggling.
Right. So for example, if I'm on my way into a target, right? I see a guy at 1200 meters. I want to engage him. I'm going to start corkscrewing and moving myself towards him right up until I get to within basically 1,000 meters. And then there's really nothing I can do. Like, there's nothing I can do to avoid fire. I'm going to get hit. No matter if I do, no matter if I'm looking at him and I'm moving in the right way and I'm doing the right things, doesn't matter. Like, you literally cannot avoid fire. If the guy has a basic level of aim, he's just going to look at you and track that movement, because the cone of how big he shoots and how much you can move to get around that is the same. So if the cone is this big, right, and I can only move enough to then if I can't get outside that cone and force him to like try to track me through that, like, it's a moot point, right? Yep. And because they've limited our SCM speeds at strafing, so if I'm looking at you, I can't create an angle wide enough to genuinely avoid damage. So basically, I just have to accept the fact that, okay, I'm coming in on this target, and I'm going to take a trade. A trade is when I do damage and you do damage, right? And then it just comes down to who can aim better. Okay. Because there's nothing I can do flight-wise that's going to be able to manage that. Like, get past his cone, get behind him, start rotating him, and actually get into a dogfight, right? Because, they've tuned these quote-unquote archetypes where it's like, well, these ships are not allowed to do that.
And it's like the light fighters that don't seem to be allowed to do that as much, as because it seems to be the interceptor that is the one that goes behind more, right? Am I
right? Because
right
the only way to meaningfully avoid damage is to just not be there when it comes.
Yeah.
And the best ship to do that in is the interceptor class. Yeah. Whether you're in a Merlin or you're in a Buccaneer, obviously the Buccaneer is the pick of choice right now, because it's got the guns of a Hornet and the speed of an interceptor. So of course I'm going to use the Buccaneer. But
so
To be fair, I
kind
saw
of help with
Vergjl
this
do
too.
it in a Gladius, but I think he's playing on hard mode and playing against people that probably aren't as talented, and
Yeah,
did
'cause
But
he's-
comment
also
that a lot.
understand too, like I'm fighting against like one opponent, yeah, right? Like evasion's only relative to the guy looking at you and the guy that you're aware of, right? Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
second player that's near you, if range isn't an issue, which it isn't in master modes because you can shoot at 4K range almost, right? Like then the fact that you are being extremely evasive in the against the target you're fighting against, you're standing still to the guy that's 2K away shooting at you very easily, right?
Okay.
So you got to keep that in mind too, right? Like evasion's only relative to who you want it to be relative to. Um, so that's an issue. But the big one too is like, and I just want to cover like my perspective on this. Like,
Please.
do I think we need to have less separation between the archetypes? We probably do, just for the sake of some of the ships being worthwhile to pick, right? Like, because at the moment, speed is king, and the reason speed is king is because gunnery is king. So you need speed to get distance, where the gunnery is not doing as much damage as it would be up close. And the issue is we need to capture the great things about 2.6, and the way you do that and the route to get there is to bring the gunnery into line, allowing the flight to flourish, right? And to not be lazily avoided by just an easy weapon system.
Guess what we had in 2.6? Lower
Go
weapon
for it.
velocities and lower weapon ranges. What a concept.
Yeah. Exactly. So like that's kind of like the frustration, right? It's like they moved the entire model towards closer ranges and closer engagements and more theatrical fighting up close. And then the weapons went hard the other direction. They got the wrong directions to go to, and instead the ranges and the speeds got quadrupled. So that's an issue, absolutely.
Have
But
they
I just
given
want to
any
cover this.
indication that they're aware of that and want to address it?
No, radio silence, and I'm assuming
Okay.
it's because it's precision mode. Like
Okay.
we're gonna see an ISC on precision mode, to which I'm not gonna be a big fan of. But I imagine they're just biting their tongue until that gets here.
But yeah,
But
go
I
ahead,
don't want to
Vergjl.
get
You want to
back.
touch on
I
something
don't want
else?
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to gunnery. Far out. But just quickly, like have I abandoned the 2-speed system, which is the bubble within the bubble, in favor of just boost being tied to acceleration and unifying SCM? No, I haven't completely given up for it, because some of the guys, and I need to do them a service here, are some of the guys that are really trying to pick this apart and typing in all the feedback channels, stuff like that. They're proposing different shapes. Now, like if you remember SitCon, Yogi got on stage and said, if you're
egg, right?
unboosted, you have the cylinder. If you're boosted, you get the egg. That shape changed pretty drastically, pretty quickly, because they discovered at the north side of the egg, when it only allowed you to push directly to your opponent instead of trying to wrap around them, because it hindered your left and right strafe so much. So you kind of handed yourself over on a silver platter by flying straight to them. So these shapes changed drastically pretty quickly, and they've come to a realization that, okay, a lot of fight geometry up close is heavily dependent on these shapes. So you're starting to see the conversation when it comes to the design about this. And this is like a really important subject, and it gets deep here. But a lot of the advanced discussions that are going on with the developers too are that, a sphere and an egg is too simple and it's not going to cut it. And it's also going to kill creativity and variation in ships. So a lot of people are proposing like a strawberry, which is like where you are rewarded for forward acceleration and you get more maneuverability in your left, right, ups and downs, so that you can wrap around an opponent if you're playing aggressive.
What
And then
shape?
halfway,
What side of
sorry?
the strawberry is the thin side?
Yeah, so the top side, which is the wider side with the wider circumference, right? That would be the aggressive forward side.
Okay.
And then the bottom of the strawberry would be where you have the least maneuverability. And when you think about that, right, Mike, that means that on the bottom side, because you're less maneuverable, because it's smaller in the shape of a strawberry, that would punish back strafing, which has been a long issue.
Yes.
Right. And then if you're playing neutral halfway up the strawberry, you've got some maneuverability on your left, right, ups, downs, but you don't have as much as if you were pushing. And what that would encourage is dogfighting to happen up close. It would reward people for closing distances and fights actually happening rather
Okay.
than reversing, and stretching out fights, which is the toxic issue we've been dealing with for the last 4 years, right? So
Mhm.
people are starting to propose really advanced, sophisticated shapes. And I think it's a good idea. Now, the reason I say this is because you can get really wild with this. You start, creating like a starship shape for alien ships, and then maybe a Cartual can only fly in bicords and tricords. Maybe alien ships can only fly with a certain shape, right? And they're very weak in certain strafes. You can the flight characteristics of this would start getting very interesting because a lot of the variation. I know Avengers about to explode. A lot of the variation in some of these ship rolls uh, is just turn rate, and it's just their components, their hard points, and stuff like that. So there's lacking different flight characteristics, and I think that we are inevitably on a route where we're deciding or figuring out that just an egg and just a sphere ain't gonna cut it.
All right, it's time for
So
some happy
that's
little ships, I
just
guess.
just quickly.
Happy little
Have I
ship.
abandoned the two-speed, SCM versus boosted two-speed difference? No, I'd like to see it reach its potential before it gets thrown in the trash can, because I do think there's some great things that could be captured about it. Because if we all put every ship class into a version of the egg, and it's just the egg's a little bigger with some ship classes and some ship archetypes, then there's not much difference between flying a Bennu Defender in a totally alien built ship in comparison to a Gladius, right? Like an alien ship won't feel like it flies alien. A light fighter will, and the issue is I think a lot of the intent for the design from the flight team is that ships will turn differently, but not necessarily fly differently. So I like the two-speed solution because it has the opportunity, if they decide to seize it, to capture some really unique flight characteristics and some really unique flight in general.
But
But
but you're
keep
kind of with them to bring it a little closer together, it seems like, but
Yeah,
not.
still,
Yeah.
still, yeah. I still want them to do that, but I also want them to start getting wacky with these shapes. Like, get creative. Look at, because I think ultimately ship maneuvering and like positional combat comes down to the shape of those sizes. I don't think
Okay.
it's to do with turn rate as much as people think it is. I don't think it's to do with overall speeds just increasing the ceilings. I think it's got to do with those shapes and those accelerations. That is my
So
debate. But with that being said, I'm not opposed to what Avengers is saying, which is a single unified speed, right?
yeah, but
That too.
let's talk about
Go
shapes
ahead.
here, right? Because
Sure.
like shapes are a massive part of like why master modes is so fundamentally different to the live model. Like in the live model,
Yep.
right? Like so, I want to use this as a reference here to because again, we know this, Vergjl, but people may not understand this, and that's
No, they
why
won't. Yeah.
I apologize for my really weird looking 100
And to
eyes,
be
but
honest, I don't think that some of the developers understand this, but keep going.
yeah, right. So hopefully this will help kind of clear it up a little bit, right? So what we had in live was we had a box, right? So we had our speeds like this, right? So the reason why tricording was such a issue was because if I wanted the most acceleration, right? I added my 10 Gs from here and my 5 Gs from here, which gave me 15 Gs. Would you not agree?
Yes.
Right? Because I got my bottoms, I got my mains. Now, obviously, I can go in terms of speeds, I can go 1,000 meters per second this way. I can go 1,000 meters per second this way, which means that if this guy is sailing away from me at 1,000 meters per second, right? Then there's no delta, which means he's here and I'm here.
And fights lasted forever, and it was the worst
Yeah.
experience.
And it was terrible because
Yeah.
it's two boxes bumping up on each other. And because I'm at the edge of his box and he's at the edge of my box, we're box tickling. Sorry. Anyway, so
It is what it is.
this shape does not work because the only way to get out of the box is to be in, let's say, an M50. Well, the M50's box is here. right? And so I have, let's say, 100 meters per second more than him, which means I can always close the distance on him, which means if I'm an interceptor and he's not, I get to engage him when he doesn't want to forever and always. That's the way it goes, as long as I'm good enough to manage that merge, right? Now,
So
I
the
would,
shape of the box is purely dependent, Mike, on the speed ceiling that ship. Yeah. So like the boundaries of these boxes are dependent on the ceiling speeds of these ships.
yes,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
Because an M50 will go faster than, or a Razor will go faster than a Vanguard, whatever, right?
Okay.
So, and obviously there's different variations and different disparities in how much the difference is. But that's why we have a meta right now in live where you see M50s and Razors all over the place, because they have one of the highest top speeds in the game. And so they can always engage. Again, they have smaller weapons and whatever, but it doesn't matter, because if I can engage you and you can't engage me, I win. So it's the exact same problem of the Hammerhead, just extrapolated faster and with smaller ships. But that's a fundamental issue that will never get solved with Live's model, because Live's model is Live's model. Master Modes fixes this. I have been a fan of Master Modes because it does fix this, because we are experimenting with different shapes. But what we've gotten instead was, now we have an SCM speed of this,
The laziest shape you could ever make.
right? It's like I now have 200 meters per second in any direction. But it's again, because of the gunnery, because I can just shoot like this and saturate an entire zone. Like, I'm not going to
Hey,
be able
Mike.
to.
Just quickly, take a screenshot. We've got a thumbnail. Go ahead. Keep going.
Right? So no matter where I go, if I go up here and try to make an angle, well, the guy just adjusts a little bit and saturates that whole zone. Okay, I can't go there. Okay, can I go here? Nope, can't go there. Okay, well, can I try to move my... No, can't go there. Okay, well, the only way I can get away from this cone is with higher speed, because relative to the gunnery, we talked about gunnery, we beat that dead horse, right?
Yeah.
So I'm arguing for SCM speeds to be here, right? Again, we don't have a box, we have a circle. So tricording gives you 10 Gs. Moving forward gives you 10 Gs. Moving this way gives you 10 Gs, depending on the thruster power, right? But essentially, no matter where I move on this clock, because if I'm using a joystick, right? My joystick, like if you were to look down and imagine like this is the center of the stick, if I'm using a game controller, like an Xbox controller, I can't reach the edges of a square, because the Xbox controller can't get up here. So physically, I would never be able to tricord, because an Xbox controller can't get to this little region. Like, it's a circle, right? So these are control issues that, and again, how many people do you know understand what tricording is? It's just not a thing that people understand.
Yeah.
So it's a knowledge ceiling rather than a skill ceiling. Again, this is corrected in Master Modes, which is genius, right? And I love that Yogi did this, because it fixes a lot of these core issues that we could never fix, and it would bring controller parity in line, which I'm all for, by the way. But what we've sacrificed, which is why I made that video, is do you understand what we're losing? Is because the way that we've tuned it, we can't make meaningful deflections to get away from stuff. So again, because the gunnery is the way it is, it just suffocates all the kind of movement. So my suggestion was, well, let's just make that circle a little bigger, keep the weapon speeds the same, keep everything the same. It's the least invasive suggestion. And from my experience, 500 feels pretty damn good, because you're not fighting all the time at 500, right? But if you get close, let's say you get right up on top of this guy, and you know you're really close, you're shooting guns, he's shooting guns, it's a real dogfight. You're just like, yeah, I want to get up there. And you know, let's say you want to move underneath him to come here. Well, once I hit that speed ceiling, he's just going to turn his nose onto me. So I need to be at basically, let's say, again, all based on ratio, I need to be at 50 meters to be able to make a deflection wide enough, close enough to gain a positional advantage. Now, if I don't have the speeds, I can never get an angle on this guy. I can never get a position. And if they suffocate my movement again, if they make my SCM speed this and my boosted speed this, right? I can't make a deflection in this direction. And that geometry, what Vergjl was talking about, is a big thing because I need to go facing my opponent,
I was
going
lost. Now I'm
sliding.
found. I understand now.
Not like I
was
need to be able
getting
to.
lost.
I need to look at my target while I move over. So I need to upstrafe in this direction, and I need to upstrafe outside of that egg so I can hook around him and actually engage him.
Like
Now
you're
I've
not. I guess another way to easily break it down is just you're trying to get to them and around them, right? Like you're not trying to just go and touch noses. You're trying to get to him and around him, like
Yeah.
when you're trying to kill them.
And the
Right.
shape examples are more for like the discussions with CIG devs that understand this stuff. But the
no, but
conversation.
Salty, you need to understand this too because this affects you too. And this
Well,
is
I
this
know
is what
it does, and I actually understand it with what you just showed. But like when you're explaining it to the general public, don't you think it makes more sense to? I don't know actually. I'm thinking like what Vergjl just said made more sense to me. Of I need to be able to just go and get around them because that's what I'm missing. And
Right.
saying that is one thing, and then the egg and the strawberry and all these other things, I think, make more sense to the people who are making the game than the ones who are playing it. Am I wrong on that, or
Right. So here's
Okay.
your strawberry, right? There's your fucking strawberry. Okay?
No, it would
Now-
be the other way round, Avenger. If
Well, I'm counting this as
I don't know
forward.
what strawberries you're eating.
Yeah, so I get this.
Okay.
I guess yeah, sorry, I guess I'm
Canadian
showing this as like
strawberries?
I get what you're saying. So I can only move, like if I'm moving backwards, I can only move this much.
No, it would be
right?
like the strawberry would actually be flipped. It would be reversed. So you'd put
It'd be fat at the top and
Yeah.
skinny and short
On
at
the
the
bottom.
back.
Yeah.
So you can. So it's.
Like,
it
well,
sounds like it's
imagine a
allowing
little
for
like
a
a
little bit
love
more
heart,
tricording.
you know?
It's bringing a little bit of tricording into the game again. Is that
It's
Yeah,
correct?
wider. It's wider by the front and then smaller at the back. Yes, like this. Yeah.
But closer to the back of the ship,
so
right?
because if I'm back strafing, I'm only gonna be able to go this direction 200.
Yeah. So you can defend with
And
distance,
and
but
I
you
can
can't
go
defend
forward.
forever. Yeah.
400. Right. So I'm obviously, I mean, I guess it depends on how you conceptualize it, but yeah, you can do it this way too. But
Yeah.
the point is, whether you look at it this way or the inverted way, is I have less room to move, but I can still go up at 400.
Yeah.
I can still go up at 400. Right. And that's important. I have less G's here, so I have less push power, but
You can eventually
I can
get there.
still gain that speed, which means if I do it correctly and I fly in on him here and I'm facing at him here, because I'm now sliding in this direction and I'm facing this way, if I had an egg, it would automatically slow me. Like if I had an egg like this, actually, no, sorry. Because I had an egg, it would look like this, right? I should be here in my speed, but because that's outside the egg cone now, it's going to automatically slow me down, and this guy is going to slip out of it, and I'm never going to be able to hold that position, ever, right? But now, because if I have a speed that makes sense...
Chat's asking for these as NFTs, by the way.
Right? So that... Oh, sorry, I fucking inverted again. So if I have this now... Actually, no, sorry. Apologize, guys. Basically a square. I'm just going to do squares. It's a little bit easier here, right? We'd obviously round the edges, right? But the point is, if I try to strafe backwards, I'm not sure, like I'm not going to have a lot. But if I'm pushing forwards and I'm sliding to the side here, I have enough speed to actually hook around him and make it because I can carry my momentum.
And this is why
Now,
we're jousting so much, right?
We're jousting because you're only going to get a drift for a second, right? So the way it is right now is because, the only way to gain an angle is to basically boost towards them really hard and then spin. And then you hold that drift for a second, you slow down, and then you go back again, and then you slow down, you go back again, you slow down, you go back again. And so it's just a constant, because we don't physically have the geometry to catch people, to merge with them, to maintain a position, because we have to be able to maintain a spot against an enemy while being guns on. That's the difference, right? Because in order for me to maintain a position on him, right, if we were to imagine this as an angle, right? If I want to be always 10 degrees out of his cone, I need to be able to always be rotating around him at a speed that corresponds to how fast he can turn. Light fighters, I got to be closer because they turn really fast. But
Does
if I
this give
can't,
room for the person that you're going up against to say, for example, does this give enough room for them to make a mistake? Or I'm trying to figure out how to frame this, because
so
what we
the
currently
whole,
have is you fight forever and nobody ever dies, right? So
right,
where does that fall? Where does this fall in the, like, we're fighting and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose?
right. So, I mean, that all depends on like the way you balance weapons too. I mean, if you have
Yeah.
ridiculously high time to kills like we have now, like of course people are going to get away. So when so I would much rather see a game where the time to kill is lower, but getting a shot is not so easy. Like it's not just this trivial thing where like everyone applies damage all the time, and then it just becomes, like I said, EVE Online 2.0, where it's much more based on how much DPS. Oh, I have a gun that does so much DPS. Like that's not how we should be conceptualizing it. Like you're in a fighter, so your shield basically is just kind of a warning signal, like, hey, you've got a bad position, you got to move because now you're taking hits. That's what it should be for. Not like, oh, I'm taking damage. I got a few seconds here. Let me just hang out here behind this
Yeah.
guy. And it just, again, right? A lot, we talked about gunnery, how that can affect the game in meaningful ways too. It's make the gunnery more difficult, get the fights closer, make them more rewarding. And when a shot does connect, it should actually do something. It should mean something. Because what we have, again, it would make turrets more fun too, because if you get fights closer and nobody's just flying around kiting, then fighters are at risk of getting hit. Turrets are in a spot where it's actually fun for them to track. And when they do score a shot, it's like bang, bang, bang. It's like, oh, I got him. Like, you want that. You want the Star Wars Episode 4, like in the Millennium Falcon, like I got him. Like you want that. And that doesn't happen in Star Citizen right now, because if that were to happen, like, if you were to take that Star Wars scene and make it with Star Citizen, the TIE fighters would be flying at range and Luke and Han would just die.
Just
And we don't,
quickly, just quickly, like when they talk about on SCL about how the 1v1s fell short, Mike, it's
Yeah.
because you can't achieve this, right? You can't
Yeah.
force this. Like you
But-
can't push and get an angle. A lot of the fights, especially in where Vergjl mentioned, it's very prevalent in the mirror matches, like a Gladius versus a Gladius. These two shapes are the exact same size, and because the shape isn't counterbalanced to reward aggression, because as aggression isn't rewarded, neither is closing distance, which is making it, and the gunnery is so powerful, it's just a face-to-face DPS race.
Yeah, and
And
I've
that's what
definitely
people are
experienced
complaining
that.
about.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and so
all the complaints are things I've absolutely experienced. You just see a guy on the
right.
screen and it's just guns and somebody dies and it's not very fun.
And that's why you find the more advanced side of the community is trying to push a lot of the maneuverability up to the front of the egg, right? Or turn it into a strawberry, so that closing distance gives you the power to maneuver and then rewards closing distance in fighting, which is what we want, right? Because the issue has always been distance in fighting and stuff like that. So we need to reward the behavior of getting closer to your opponent, because that
And
is
then
the entire point of master
and
modes.
then the
And
closer
it's
they
not
are, they can dial back a lot of the assists that they're giving players, right?
sure,
And then
sure. And I think it's important too that like we don't just want that to be the case, which is like why I actually don't mind a strawberry, because like the bottom half of the strawberry, yes, it is shorter, but the reward of using that side and deciding to backstrafe into that aspect of the flight characteristics is you've already got that distance. So it's important for the people that are backing up and wanting to be able to do that. They still need to be able to do that, but they need to be losing momentum in the fight. They need to be on the weaker side of this to promote good gameplay. Because the problem is right now, because of the weapon distances and the time it takes to get to each other, it's like the strawberries reversed and everyone's playing backwards gameplay. They kite back, they just matador is the terminology I use, which is where they just keep their nose on and they keep their momentum going backwards, and they just punish you and shoot you if you try to push at all. So that's kind of the frustrations of the community right now. Inevitably, they're going to reward pushing. It's like obvious. It's the biggest known issue. It's been an issue forever. They're obviously, I think, going to fix it, and they're inevitably going to come to the conclusion that you need to reward pushing with better maneuverability than staying idle or backing up.
Will
Benji, go
this
for it.
will this be any
Sorry.
problem with? I just want to go back to something that Vergjl said like a really long time ago. Is that light fighters just feel like dueling ships? Is that
Yes.
does this solve a lot of that and make them more relevant in these group fights with these larger ships, problematic interceptors,
Yeah, it does.
all that, light
It
fighters, heavy
does.
fighters, medium fighters?
It absolutely pushes them further into their archetype, which is to be the maneuverable ship. They are the most maneuverable ship out of all the archetypes.
Mhm.
So yes, to a degree, but I still think the Buccaneers and the Interceptor classes are going to be too ridiculous regardless. But it does push them further into their own DNA. So Avengers right, and also that is right, yeah. And there's probably a middle ground between both of those, right? Like the light fighter needs to have great maneuverability, and the other ship classes need to have a little bit more maneuverability, so they're not as boring to play. Because I tell you what, you're having fun in a Gladius, but you're not having nearly that amount of fun in a Vanguard. Because a lot
Oh,
of the
buddy.
flight has been is boring in the Vanguard. Would you agree that it's like boring in the slower ships?
It's funny. I was on stream yesterday and I took out the Hurricane, which is a heavy fighter, and I had a blast. I took my dad out, actually, who's my turret gunner.
Oh yeah,
and we were
awesome.
goofing around and we were getting into fights, and I shot down 2 Hornets, like decent Hornet pilots, in the Hurricane. And I look at master modes and I'm just like, there's not a chance in hell. Like, there's no way, because like you fly around a Vanguard right now, like you can't avoid any damage, like 0. And this is the whole issue I'm talking about. It's, they've pigeonholed these ships and they've restricted them so dramatically that it really does become, if this ship is on the field, this ship wins. What I'd like to get to, like EVE Online, I use this as an example, but let's say you take, and people who know EVE Online will understand this a bit more, but the idea that, let's say you have 100 ships, right? And they're cruisers. Now in EVE Online, cruisers are great ships. They're balanced a certain way. And the counter to those are frigates, right? So frigates are smaller, faster, and they can get up on the cruisers and they can engage them or whatever, right? So you have 100 frigates and 100 cruisers. Now, in that fight, the cruisers are going to lose, but they're not going to lose like without taking out a bunch of frigates while that's happening. We have it right now in Star Citizen where if you bring 100 Vanguards to the table and you take 100 Buccaneers, which is the counter, 100 Buccaneers will be alive and 100 Vanguards will be dead. That is a huge problem, because you've taken out a lot of the gray zone area where in EVE Online, it's simulated through the skill points of your character. I've trained dogfighting to level 5. I've trained armor systems 4. I've trained this and that, right? So the time that you have invested in the game equates to the level of character skill, because EVE Online does not simulate physical input skill.
Yeah.
It simulates it via the level of your character. Star Citizen does not have a leveling system. You don't train dogfighting level 5 and then all of a sudden you get 20. You don't get 20% more damage. What happens is, because the game is
for sure, but other than that, yes, I largely agree. Of course,
if the game is designed to a place where you can get to level 50, and by level, like Vergjl represents a level 50 combat pilot.
Yes.
Because I've got literally 10,000 plus hours in Star Citizen. Vergjl, I'm sure you've got a ton as well. So we've put our time in. We've invested the time into developing and leveling up our skill set, right? And so a guy that walks right in the door shouldn't just be able to get to level 50 dogfighting in 2 days. Like it's not good, because you're going to get super bored super fast. And this whole argument that we have, this whole debate about like we can adjust weapon and gunnery, we can adjust speeds on SCMs, is all to do with increasing the skill ceiling so that you can get that depth of experience, so that we don't have issues where we have 100 Vanguards losing against 100 Buccaneers, because they've narrowed the skill side of the game to such where the calculation of whether you win or not is 80% based on ship choice and position, or not position, ship choice and loadout, and 20% based on do you have enough aim skill to basically get on target. If you can do that, you've filled the quota for like how much skill do I need to win this calculation.
Do you agree on all this, Vergjl, or
yeah, like
anything you
I
wanna
can
add?
see where he's saying, and I think that this can grow in like multiple aspects, right? Like the skill ceiling is relative to all the mechanics that make up dogfighting entirely. It's even down to the capacitors.
Yeah.
You know, I think I do think he's right, because if you increase if you decrease the variation between the archetypes to the point that they still capture the essence of being that archetype. A heavy fighter is still a heavy fighter, an interceptor is still an interceptor, but then you reduce the separation between those classes to make them more competitive with each other, to allow them a little bit more freedom to be creative, to have variation in their gameplay. It's a good thing, but you can go too far with this, because if the variation's too close to each other, the speeds are too similar, then it's everybody get into the Buccaneer, or it's everybody get into the Hornet Ghost. So it's a careful balance. I always say this in every video I make. It's like it's about finding a middle ground between all of us.
Yep.
And as I believe that where we are at now is not it. And I do think there's a middle ground between probably where Avengers trying to pull us, right? Like, do I want the speeds at 500, 600? I'm skeptical. Would I be much happier at full 500? Yeah. You know, like it's like that. So yeah, like I definitely agree with his argument. I think he's on the right path, and I think everybody is right about their arguments. I don't think there's been a single person making
Me
an
neither.
argument that's wrong. It's about, I don't think they have the perfect answers. You know, I think that's the key here, right? Is like when people say they've got an issue with this, or like the lack of variation, the skill ceiling needs to get higher. Every when they all say this, they're right. It needs to be easier for me to be able to play. I need to be able to multi-crew. I think when people make these complaints and stuff, they're legitimate. It's about the answer, though. I don't think everybody's right, and I think it exists between us all, and that includes me. You know, where I'm trying to pull it and thinking my ideas are great. I think the actual answer is going to be between my ideas, Venge's ideas, Yogi's ideas, and stuff. Because I don't think Yogi and all that have it entirely figured out either.
I mean, they were pretty honest about that. They don't this week.
Yeah. Yeah, but ultimately his debate's like 100% right. It is. I'm 100% on board. It is too simple. The classes are too pigeonholed into their own flight characteristics. There's not much variation of flying the Warden. If you're in the Warden, you're backing up and trying to get them in front of you, and that's it. You've got no other choice.
Turret?
If you're in a
Does
Hornet,
the turret and the Warden have any play into this factor at all, or no? Just curious, because I was in a Warden.
I haven't tested it. I'm not going to comment on it.
I was in the turret of a Warden, and again, we weren't going against good pilots, like great pilots or anything, and we shit on them. They were in light fighters, and I shit on them.
Okay, so here's what I have a problem with when it comes to CIG devs saying, "Oh, we've looked at the data." Your data fucking sucks. It sucks. Your data sucks, and the reason your data sucks, and I know I'm going to get hate for this.
You're
but
not,
it's the truth.
And I will defend you to the death on this. So continue.
You know, and
I'll jump in.
Look, I'm going to try to say this as politely as I can, and I love you guys, Yogi. I love you, buddy. But if you're getting data, it's going to be wrong, because Mike running around in a turret, you're going to look at the data and be like, okay, we had 1,000 kills in turrets today from the Connie. You're going to be like, okay, so turrets are actually applying damage more. Here's the problem. Our problems at the quote unquote high skill ceiling are going to become your problems. Every single Star Citizen's problem when the game starts to release. Because once you figure out what the meta is, guess what? Everybody's going to start doing that, because that's what works. So over time, people are going to start shifting into the higher skill ceiling levels. And I'm not saying they're going to get to the Avenger 1, Vergjl, tournament ready levels, but they're going to get into the 80th percentile where they're like, okay, I understand that range kiting a hammerhead is how you fight. Okay, I'm going to do that now. I'm not going to do it to Avenger 1's level. I might lose a few Buccaneers in the process, but everyone knows that in order to fight a hammerhead, you just range kite it. Like, that's how you do it. Like, so if you don't fix these core fundamental issues, your data is going to look like garbage, you know?
How frustrating was it for you two, for the original ISC, as the high-end pilots that you are, to hear them say that everybody is saying it's good? Because that was the thing that I almost lost my mind.
Lie. That is a bold-faced lie. That is propaganda. That is 100% CIG propaganda.
I don't think it is.
I think it is.
No,
because they're basing.
Let me finish just for a second, because again, we're going to agree. We're going to agree. We're going to agree. Trust me, we're going to agree, because they're coming at it from the perspective of how many people are playing these master modes tests right now. Nobody, right? So if you're having the people you've been hearing complain about the game for 10 years, which is you guys, like, to them about the flight model or whatever, who they are tuning out at this point for sure, right? To some extent, and then because it's just a natural thing to do, right? I'm not saying. I'm trying not to be an asshole about it, but it's just we would, anybody would in that case. And then they're hearing new people say they like it, and then going off of that and being like, we're doing good, is something that I think is so dangerous. And my argument has always been, this shit needs to be in live, it needs to be in the PU, and you need to force everybody to deal with this, and then you're actually going to get feedback. Then whatever data you have is not going to be skewed as much, or whatever, right? So my argument is their data has been they're gathering data on master modes from an incomplete set or a very small set. Therefore, it's not it's just not a big enough sample size to say it's good or bad yet. You have such a small sample size. You have the top PvPers, and you have people playing occasionally here and there going, yep, feels good, I hit my shots for once. So
yeah, but but just let me say this one analogy, and I use this analogy on my stream. You know, we went from Formula One cars, and we're both, me and Vergjl, are Formula One drivers, basically, down to go-karts. So of course, all the kiddies that come to the park now are going to be like, "This is so much fun. This is great," and that's good. I'm all for people getting in the cars and driving them and having a good time. But my argument's like, okay, well, let's not go back to Formula One cars, because obviously, like, only the 1% of the 1% are going to be able to drive those cars. And I agree. I'm like, I don't want to see that
20 racing against each other.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to see that. Maybe, like, with one or two fighters kind of thing, where it's like they are the ships that, you know, like, only the best pilots get in, but if you're a rookie, it's like, don't fly that ship, right? That you can make an argument for, like, one or two ships, like a snub fighter category, you know, maybe Anvil, something like that. But the point is, if you take the middle ground, like we've been arguing, right? We're always coming from the standpoint of, like, let's not do the bumper cars. Let's do like, you know, touring cars. You know, let's do something that requires skill to maneuver, requires skill to execute on. And the guys that are in the bumper carts are going to get into the touring cars at some point, and they're going to be so glad they did, you know. Anyway, I just wanted to use that analogy, right?
Yeah, I think it's
because the data they're getting is like it's like they went from, you know, getting the Formula One stats, and they're just like, look, we've got 1,000 wrecks on corner 2, and it's like nobody can drive these cars. And then they go down to bumper cars, and they're just like, look at the stats, they're amazing.
Let me follow your analogy though, right? Like, and because I disagree with this. I actually am on CIG side with this. Like, and to use your Formula One car, you know, in comparisons to bumper cars, I would argue that the live squadron battle experience is like Formula One after, you know, lap 50 with bald tires on a wet track, and we're all slipping out on the grass.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it doesn't really make sense at that point. At that point, call the race. Okay. We race another day. You know, so I do think that, like, the bumper car stuff does make sense to a degree. Like, so, you know, when I look at, and this is what SCL, you know, and it's a shame you missed it, Avenger, because they really emphasized this on SCL, was that, you know, it's a framework. So when you go into the squadron battle for master modes, you need to tick a certain amount of boxes. 1, are all these ships getting picked because they're viable? Yes. 2, are people of different backgrounds enjoying being able to participate in the same battle? Yes. Are they actually scoring well? or at all on these
Yes.
scoreboards and landing kills?
I can
Yes.
answer yes
You
on that
know,
one.
yeah, and does this fight look representative of something you would expect in a sci-fi game of the spectacle that is Star Citizen, right? Like, does this look like a Star Wars battle? Yes. Now, the issue I have, to Avengers credit, is it doesn't feel like you're a Formula One driver. It does feel a little bit about bumper cars. But I would say it's a success. In Squadron Battle, now I am the polar opposite to Avengers credit. The 1v1s are terrible. They're
Oh, they're
absolutely terrible.
terrible. Yeah.
There's very little skill expression. They're so simplistic. We are going to get bored of them very quickly.
And
But
that's a
with that
direct
being said,
correlation to the flight geometry and the skill ceiling.
yes,
Because duels
yeah,
were so much fun is because it's two boxers getting in the ring knowing that they've trained for 6 months, and it's exciting because there's a lot of skill there. There's depth. But sorry, go on.
you could push it. Yeah, and you could push it as far. You could keep pushing it every day, and trying to reach new limits. I absolutely get that. And yeah, so I think that, like, I would say that the squad battles and master modes are a gigantic success. Do I think they're finished? Gosh, no. There's a wealth of stuff to improve on. Missiles,
Yeah, we
better
agree on that.
balancing, the bucks and that are running rampant. Yeah, but
But we're
like,
talking
it
fundamentals here.
ticked. Yes, and I think it ticked the fundamentals. Absolutely. I think the framework, I think Squadron Battle makes sense for the first
Yeah, we're
time.
agreeing on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, with that being said, I think the 1v1s are, absolutely terrible. So I do agree with what they said, to what you to what sprung this whole thing up, Mike, is I do think that they were right there. And to be honest, I thought it was very admirable that they went up there on ISC and SEO and said that 1v1s fell short, because I thought they were just going to pretend it didn't, but they said, "Yep, we know it sucks."
So what do we
Like,
push? So I'm confused. I'm lost. What are we pushing back on? Like, what do we disagree on?
I don't. Oh, you said that. I think you were saying that the squadron battles for master modes weren't a success. Like, the team fights in your eyes weren't a success
No,
in master modes.
No.
No, you're not.
no.
Okay.
There's something else we can test, but I lost it now. Look,
The data, the data.
yeah,
from,
the data is not correct because it was the data. So we were talking about data, and if the intention is to get more people involved, yes, from that point of view, it's a success. But I'm not
Mhm.
debating whether or not. Again, I want people to get involved. I want them.
course.
I'm just like I said, what I see is bumper cars, and I'm like, all my suggestions are like, let's bring it up to the touring category, because in the long run, people are going to graduate into the touring cars because they get out of the bumper cars once the theme park's over. Look, if you want to make Squadron 42 bumper cars, that's up to you guys. But
And I think that's what they did. And now we're dealing with bumper cars, and we hope that they're going to bring it up to touring cars. But do we know? And
Yeah,
have
but
they
if you
really
have-
given us the opportunity to trust them that they will? And I don't think so yet.
I think I trust Yogi.
Okay.
I don't trust CIG, but I trust Yogi.
Yeah.
I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he's a really smart guy. I think he knows what he's doing.
Me
And I think
too.
I think he genuinely listens to people. And I think he's got enough courage to actually go like, you know what, I'm going to make a choice and actually go with it, maybe
Okay.
against other
I mean,
people's
trust
opinions.
to deliver it. So maybe that's like the CIG
Delivery is not
example.
entirely on CIG, like on
Yogi,
not
yeah.
CIG, on Yogi, right? Like, I think it's a bit unfair to put everything on him, right?
I'm
like
not.
he is,
I'm not.
he's not you, but I think a lot of people kind of put everything on him, right?
Yeah.
And I also think for some strange reason, I think that, it's in a weird kind of way, like, we're not getting enough people focused on master modes as I think we should be. I mean, master modes is it is literally the game, like how ships interact with each other, the relationship between speeds, weapons, ships,
Not
shields,
just
all that
combat.
stuff. Yeah, not just combat, everything in between. Like, that is literally the game. And you've got one guy working on it who's probably doing a million things.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
This.
So to me, it's like, okay, guys. I mean, this, if we're in the final stages of Star Citizen, it should be all hands on deck for master mode. There should be a team of 50 people working on this, and it should be iterations every couple weeks to be like, okay, how's this look? And like, quicker, let's go quicker. Like, why don't we have all the ships? Like, me and Vergjl could do the numbers on these ships in 2 days. It's like, you don't tell me that there's a bunch of guys at CIG working full time that they can't get that done in 2 weeks.
I don't know.
If you put them on it.
I hate making
I'm
claims
more-
like
I'm
that because
more-
I've never worked in this situation, so you
I
have
have
no
a
idea.
bigger issue. I have a bigger issue with the fact that like we are talking about getting spaceship flight finalized, or even we're talking about the framework of flying a spaceship at the 12-year mark. Like we have
It's
toilets in the game and we're still designing space flight. Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
crazy.
Look, it's easy to
Man.
devolve
Like
into
that is,
negativity. I get you.
and it's a five developer team to like Avengers credit. Like I'm pretty sure Yogi's been starved of resources until like right now at the finishing line of Squadron 42. Like they're finally getting the development resources, I think is my understanding.
It was very nice to see
To
how many
start
people
working
were
on
on the
this.
screen at ISC,
Yeah.
and how many they had
Yep.
on SCL. That it seems to be there's more people involved. So,
Yeah.
and
But isn't it crazy that like we're here now? Like, like it's year 12 or whatever, and we're getting space flight done, and we've got a wealth of all these other, gameplay systems, mining. We have an in-game prison, like literally an in-game prison, but we don't have in-game flight proper
That's
yet,
just Star Citizen,
so
buddy.
yeah, that part to me is the exhausting part. Like we should have been here a long time ago. And this needs to be it. Like master modes needs to be the final time they reinvent the wheel with this stuff.
Oh, it will be.
Absolutely.
They've
no
said
matter
it.
what,
Like,
it will be. And this is like
Yeah.
will the game live or die from in this aspect of it, right? The game may live.
And it's so
And
important.
the game may be successful from other people's eyes, but for what people don't understand, and I think a lot of people were addressing this a few times in the chat about they're only talking about combat. They're only talking about combat. Well, some people are only going to participate in combat here, and some people are only going to run cargo. But occasionally,
and there should be a
you
high
will
skilling
meet
for both.
Yep, and occasionally you will meet each other as well, right?
Yep.
That will happen. But the idea here is they need to get it right. And if you are yelling and giving feedback as loud as possible, yeah, sometimes we might not say things the way they want to hear them or you want to hear them, but now is the time to say everything about this situation because it really feels like this is it. They are, I don't know how close we are to the finish line, but they're damn sure trying to push towards it, and this isn't good enough from any aspect of the game right now. So everybody needs to be speaking their minds on this, hopefully being respectful about it, and that's what we're trying to do here, is we're coming to the final framework of this system and then tweaking it here and there. It will always be tweaked till the end of time, but this is the box we're going to live in. This is the flight model box we're going to live in, whether you like it or not. The game lives and dies with this because they're not doing this again. So they got to get it right. And if people like Avenger are getting passionate about it, it is what it is. Like, accept it. If Vergjl's getting passionate about it, accept that they're just fucking passionate about it. I don't know why everybody loses their mind when people get upset, right?
Yeah, but it's not
it is what
just
it is.
passion. Like, and I don't want to toot my own horn here, but it's like we have understanding and knowledge that,
Yes.
like, at a deep
Yeah,
level.
I'm not
So-
limiting it to just passion, obviously.
You know, it's like, I really resent the idea of, like, let me ask you this, right? Like, if you're gonna ask for feedback on anything, are you gonna ask experts and people that are in the field, or are you gonna ask some random person on the street?
I talked very often with the people that worked on mining.
Because you do it a lot. You have a deep knowledge of mining, correct?
Yes.
So does your opinion matter more than my opinion on mining?
Yes.
The answer is yes. The
That's
answer
a
is yes.
spicy situation,
No,
though.
it's the
just
truth.
because-
It's the look. I will
Yeah,
say it as
it's
clear
spicy
as
because
as clear as
everybody
day.
flies ships. Not everybody's going to mine, right? That's the only argument I'm making here is that everybody's got to fly their ships.
But you listen to the experts.
I think a good middle point, right, is you rely on SaltEMike for his expertise, and you rely on Avenger for his first interactions with it, right? Like it's like you want the skill floor to be low so that people like Avenger who
It
don't
depends on
have
what you're
as
trying to
much
address
experience
as well, right?
is enjoyable. But you also want to take SaltEMike's feedback seriously because he's an expertise at it and is very familiar with the previous versions, etc.
You
Right,
got to
but
They're
hold
listen
on.
both
to the
important,
new
but
players
they're
for the
important for
base
different
mechanic,
reasons.
but you got to
Yeah.
make sure that the people who want that to be at the top of the skill ceiling, that is enjoyable as well. You kind of have to listen to both. But where they're only seeming to focus right now, unfortunately, feels like that the overall experience, and it's hurting the experience at the top, right?
Hold up.
Go
So
ahead.
let me explain it to you this way. So you are correct, right? And Vergil's correct. You're both right in the sense that, of course, you're going to listen to all the feedback.
Yeah.
But it's the way you're listening to it. So I'm standing at a point where I'm like ringing the alarm. I'm like, hey guys, by the way, geometrically this doesn't work. Ratio wise this doesn't work. Speed wise this doesn't work. These are all the reasons it doesn't work. Here's some examples. Here's some videos to prove what I'm talking about is not bullshit. So I'm trying to help you. Like I'm genuinely trying to help you, coming from a place of understanding about the gameplay. I've played every single iteration. I've been around since the beginning of this project. I played every single iteration of the game in every single way, every single patch, constantly, and always been like competent at it. So you should take Mike's feedback if Mike's coming from the place of like, hey, I wasn't doing good in live and now I'm doing all right. So that's good. So it's like success, but that's where the buck stops. No offense, Mike. I love you to death, buddy. But if you start talking about geometry like you know what you're talking about, I'm going to call you out and be like, yo, bro. And that should be, and that's not me being a dick. It's just like, that's how the world works.
I don't take it that way.
We need to base this on merit and competence, not based on how you feel about it. And everyone gets fucking participation trophies. It's ridiculous. And I know I'm an asshole for bringing this up.
I don't
and
think
I might
so.
be animated and Vergjl won this and that, but it's
This
the
is
truth.
the passion part.
Like
right?
you put people in positions who are competent. That's how the world goes round. You don't put people in place because it's based on how you feel. If you base on everything how you feel, like this and that, we're gonna end up with a product that's gonna not last the test of time. That people are gonna be bored and lame and get bored of super quick. And so this game that you had such great feelings about, guess what? It's not gonna be a successful game in the long run. Squadron 42 will have record sales for the first little bit, and then it'll be bad press for the rest of the time. Because it's like, remember that game that took 12 years to make and it was super simple and boring? Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And you're not going to have a lot of people signing up to play your PU. It's going to be Elite Dangerous, but slightly more enjoyable. Like, it's just, I don't like, let me give you an example. Look at Starfield. Look at all the hype behind Starfield. Oh, it's this amazing game. It's so incredible. Oh my God, Starfield. Who plays Starfield now, dude? Boring.
Yeah.
People don't play Starfield. The answer is they don't play Starfield because Starfield's boring. The gameplay is boring. And guess what? A lot of mechanics and the way that Starfield handles its flight are similar to what we're doing in Master Mode. So I get that making the game...
You've been talking to Greasy Khaleesi.
I've never even talked to that guy.
Okay,
like legitimately. But I mean, there's a similar boost mechanic. You know, there's a similar gimbal mechanic. There's a lot of similar mechanics here. So it's like, you know, we have solutions to these problems. Like I brought up the gunnery solution, remove pips. Here's some examples of what it looks like. You know, you want the lower speeds. Well, look at that. It's already, you know, it's everything that they're talking about. They want lower speeds, more cinematic, this, that, and the other. Okay, well, here's an example of that working exactly the way you want it to, you know? So tune the game based on that inspiration. You know, if they want more DCS in space, which was what Live was, you know, I remember when Yogi came out and was like, you know, we spoke to real pilots and we're talking about this and that. And, you know, we're talking about OODA loops and all this jazz. And I was like, holy guacamole, it's happening. You know, we've got this incredible experience and obviously it's got some problems and it's not like it wasn't unsalvageable. Like there's so many things they could have done with the Live model that would have fixed all these issues, you know? So it's just that they had a cake in the oven and they pulled it out halfway and they're like, it's not good. And I'm like, make the cake, man. Like, are you kidding me? So it's like, now we got a fourth cake in the oven. Okay. You know, it's got the same toppings on it, just in different variations. We've got strawberries on it this time. It's a little sweeter, right? It looks a little nicer. But don't
cake tastes like shit.
Don't pull it out of the oven.
But
and
if
be
you
like,
eat it,
that's
you
a 10.
can't eat the cake every day, or it starts to taste like shit. Basically,
right?
It's gotta be a cake you can eat every fucking day for the rest of your life. In the game.
Yes, but are you going to go to a master baker? Are you going to go to someone who runs a bakery shop and says like, hey, this is how I make cakes for 10 years. This is what I like to do, this and that. Are you going to look at him and be like, yeah, you know, I should probably take some.
This analogy, Avenger 1 and Vergjl are the guest taste testers
simple people, Mike.
at
We're
the
simple people.
cooking shows. This is great. You know, I love your use of the
He doesn't love
key
cake.
ingredient here.
Listen, I know how to make cakes, all right? I'm just saying. So if you put a cake in the oven and you already know that base is fucked up, this is fucked up, this, it's not going to turn out like a good cheesecake because you've made a billion cheesecakes. So you're like, okay, I know what's going to work here. So please listen to me, you know, as a master caketeer, whatever the hell they call themselves.
Yeah.
You know, look, we've made great cakes since the 90s.
The only thing is that I think what we need to agree on here is that the in the analogy that you're giving, you guys are not Top Chef, but the master chefs with the a la cuisine guy, right? You guys are the chefs in that kitchen.
Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
And the thing is that very few people can afford to eat at those guys' restaurants. And
okay, but are you not going to take their suggestions and like? Do you like guitar? Do you play guitar?
No.
Oh fuck.
Okay, let me explain. Hold up. Let me give you an analogy here, right? Because this is exactly what's going on.
Guitar versus Guitar Hero or something like that?
No. Okay, so there are manufacturers, Gibson,
I know of them.
Paul Reed Smith, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me give you this example. So Paul Reed Smith took a lot of stuff about what was great about Gibson and all these other guitars and made his own brand, right? And he makes these like $20,000, $30,000 guitars, like they're super expensive, gorgeous guitars. Like just they play beautiful, feel beautiful. They're amazing. But then he made another model, and this was like they called them like student models or whatever. And they were very similar to the really, really, really high-end models. And they took all the lessons learned from the high-end models and just brought it down to a cheap price point. Like it was like $800 for this guitar. So cheap. $800 for a really good guitar is a good buy. So you went from $6,000 to $10,000 guitars to $800. So you've now become super accessible. But you go buy one of these $800 guitars from Paul Reed Smith and you play it. It sounds great. It plays great. It feels great because it's based off of what these really high-end guitars are made from.
Yeah.
So we can do the same analogy when it comes to Star Citizen. It's like, look, we know how these really high-end models and how this plays. We know Star Wars Squadrons was a success. We know these old games in the back in the 90s, Free Space, this and that. We know all this stuff works. So let's take what was great about those things and let's put it to a place where it's accessible and everyone can play guitar. Everyone can play jazz. Oh, it's so much great now. Right?
It's not going to be. Mike?
But I'm kind of. Are you? But
we got a shitty little banjo over here, Mike.
I know. This is ridiculous. I'm playing. I think I'm playing the maracas in this fucking band. I'm just playing the tambourine. This is bullshit. But no, the
fucking triangle.
In general, I think
yes.
we need the game to be accessible.
We need more cowbell.
But you also want to eat at the nice restaurant sometimes. And you guys are going to be the people who are eating at the nice restaurant every day, hopefully, right? But right now, there is no nice restaurant to eat at. You're eating at fucking McDonald's. Is what it's sounding
and
like.
again,
but we gotta know what the analogy is because I think we're losing everybody.
Yeah, because
I keep making them too, and I'm fucking losing my own thought process.
No, my only counter is you have to market the product to a wider audience too, right? So when people get their hands on it the first time, like it needs to be not too daunting for them to be completely discouraged from wanting to even get into it, right? So like, yeah, we need the depth and complexity that you're pushing for a venture, but it also needs to immediately feel good for the people to encourage them to actually want to get involved in PvP and stuff like that too.
Yeah. But you need to have it to where, and I think this is where Avenger lost people in his video, but he was 100% right, is you need to have it where you're going from that entry level and working and have the potential to work your way up. So, and a lot of video games do this through skill systems of, progression in the game, but we can only do it with our joysticks, with our thumbsticks, with our mouse and keyboard. And that's the only way it's going to happen in this game to the most extent. We know there's going to be like little skill systems added, and they've even mentioned the idea of like G-forces. They
soft
said
skills are fine.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
whatever.
It's like it's like a benefit to being alive longer and stuff. Like I'm fine, but it doesn't change the fact that if you do a bad corkscrew and you don't execute well on a turn, you die.
Yeah.
Whether you're level 100, whatever, or you're level 0. And that is what's amazing about Star Citizen. Like that is truly what's incredible about the game. Like that itself is what's going to make this game like the game of the generation, like Chris is always talking about.
Do you both think
it will not be that game if it doesn't have the depth? It just won't be that game.
But keep in mind, and I want to just quickly, the icing on the cake, haha. But like I want to add to this because this is like where everybody loses Avenger, right, is just because we're talking about a depth or a height of a ceiling, longevity in the game, does not mean we're talking or this equates to power, right? Like, we're not talking about an arrow taking out an Idris. We're not talking about an arrow soloing a hammerhead or an arrow taking out your entire squad of boys, right? Like, it's not about that. It's about there just being depth in the gameplay. That's it. In all
It's being
aspects,
fun.
like,
You're asking for
yeah,
fun. You're not asking for
longevity,
well,
fun and
fun
longevity.
equals
Yeah,
longevity in my opinion, but yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because if the game is gets boring, like you've said, you're not going to continue to play it, right? And I do think to
Yeah.
some extent to learn that the nuances of the game will equate to power in the long term game. As far as orgs, like your two orgs are probably going to be a big part of the power struggle in the game's universe whenever it comes out, right? Because we certainly hope that we're going to be fighting over some sort of territory. Who's going to be fighting over it? The best combat orgs, right? But if you don't have the ability to be the best combat org, what the fuck are we doing? So this stuff has to exist, right? And everybody should want this, because if it's
And if
just
there's no depth,
Zergs,
we won't.
it's going to be
If there's no
shit.
depth, if the ceiling's not high, right, then people won't want to be the best, right?
Yeah.
Like, it'll just be people who play day to day, right? And they're not trying to push any limits. They're not trying to turn this into a sports. They're not trying to teach their friends how to play and stuff because there won't be much to teach, right? And I think to answer your question, I think you were getting to this point, Mike, was do we think we're going to get there? I think
Yeah.
we inevitably are. I think, like Vergjl mentioned on SCL, it's the framework, it's the beginnings. And from here, we start building the ceiling, right? Like, this is the floor, this is the framework, this is the, the outline of this. And now we start lifting it from here, right? It starts getting depth, it starts getting complexities, it starts getting tuning, and it keeps inside of this framework where everyone gets to play. Where the guys who are flying the constellations get to PvP now because they haven't PvP'd for the last 6 years. Where the guys in the hammerheads don't get abandoned if they nerf the gunnery, right? Like, and fix the issues there. If people get to fly the damn Buccaneer for the first time, because I can't believe I'm saying it, but the Buccaneer is the most OP ship out now. So there's a lot of people that haven't been able to play. They will get to now, but the issue is, to Avengers' credit, it's an issue for me too, is the light fighter guys, the guys who are fighting the small fighters. We had it good the last 3 years. We did, and we don't want that gone. But CIG need to build that back up. So they build it back up for the light fighters. They'll build it back up for interceptors. They'll build it up for the first time for heavy fighters, and they're going to build it up for the first time for engineering and multi-crew, right? And I think that the light fighter guys are inevitably going to get what we had back. It's just a matter of time because it's such complex balancing.
Do you agree,
Like, the
Avenger?
flight characteristic design is insane. Go ahead.
Because I think the major difference between the two of you guys is Vergjl really feels like everybody's on the same page. We're gonna get there, and the vibe that I've always gotten from Avenger through his content lately is that he's nervous if we are or if we aren't, right? So
That's not true.
I'm trolling.
I couldn't hear what Vergjl said.
I said the world's over. But if you watched SCL, I really wish you watched SCL, Avenger, because I think you'd have some copium in the tanks if you watched it. Like, they were very transparent with its shortcomings and stuff. That's all. And they were very clear. It's a framework. It's the beginning. It needs to, become great from here. Kind of the message I took from it.
Is the real question.
But again, the question is
how
that I have complete faith that it is going to get better.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be here. If I had zero faith that the team was capable of doing that. Look, I mean, you got great guys on the team. Bear, I flew with him back in the day. I know he's a great pilot.
Yeah.
Brant, great guy. Yogi, great guy. Like, you got a lot of guys who are on that team who are not uneducated about this stuff.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
So, like, if it wasn't for those guys, I would definitely be like, yeah, but it's because of those guys and their willingness to come out and talk about it, I think is really, speaks to their character, but it also speaks to their willingness to want to make the great game that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's how they're going to do it. that's my whole thing, you know, is because I've got so many hours in the game. To me, 500 has always felt amazing. I argued for lower speeds in live. I argued for higher speeds in master modes. There's a common thing here. It's around the 400 to 500 meter mark. If you go into atmosphere in live, the separations, the ratio of combat in atmosphere in live is a good spot. Like it feels good, right? And you can just tune it from there and get the ships in the right spots and this, that, and the other. You know, we talked about the gunnery system. I think personally for me, like if I had it my way, I would completely change the gunnery system to a no pip system, a gun sight system like we'd see in typical dogfighting games.
It's an interesting thought for sure.
You know, increase the weapon velocity so they make sense. I would decrease the time to kill. So when you actually do get shots on target, it makes sense. You know, adjust the turn rates of ships and the sluggishness and the response so it actually forces you to roll and bank into your turns so that shooting off center doesn't get so like, because then if you just aim onto it regardless of orientation, it just becomes an aim game. You've stopped flying at that point. You know, like flying is a lot of turning in, banking into your turns, looking at the movement, extrapolating where he's going to go, and then turning into it. Right.
That's interesting as
Chris
well.
going like this and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, that means
that's a lot of the issues that we have now is we're kind of going like this to aim at each other instead of flying into each other. There's a lot less flying and a lot more aiming. Right.
Let's cover two more things real quick before we wrap it up, because I think we're missing like a really important aspect here. I'll just mention too, and I don't think you're going to even want to add anything to this. I don't know, Avenger, but capacitor swapping, like in a 1v1, like capacitor swaps went from, we actually counted it like 100 around in any duel. You know, like if you were to fight any class or any ship, almost do up to 100 capacitor changes in live. Now,
but with
some of the most
them,
competitive 1v1s, you could. Not a lot of people did that. I just got you to do that. But
I
with
macro
that
them.
being said, yeah, it was just a reload thing, right? But it was up to 200 changes in live. And then with that being said, in master modes, competitive dogfighting, it's 2. It's actually just 2 changes. You start in one, you go to another. The second half,
somebody
of the fight,
dies.
That's it. So we're talking, like 1,000% decrease or whatever, right? Like this is. The complexity of capacitors is completely out the window, and the maintenance required for it completely gone, almost zilch.
Look,
I don't know how I feel about it. What about you, real quick?
So, I think they need a complete redesign of the capacitor system. And I have always been, again, we've seen it work in other games before. Is I think the afterburner mechanic entirely needs to, be locked away in a dark closet and never returned. You know, we should just have that not egg shaped, the strawberry shaped SCM. If anything, obviously after speeds on interceptors will be higher in that forward direction, so they can go forward, right? So you can make a different cone size for that, whatever, right? So there's some variability there. But the capacitor system is not corresponding to the way the game wants to go, because right now it is just a glorified reload mechanic.
Yep, and in live, which is not good either, right? But keep going.
Like clearly they were inspired when Squadrons came out that the power management system was amazing. It's probably the best power management system for a 3D fighter shooter you'll ever have in any game you'll ever play.
How do you want it to be, guys?
Look, I want power management to matter in a sense that, so for example, I'll use this example. If I had it my way, if I put 100% power allocation to my engines, my SCM speed increases, my Gs slightly go up, and my response goes up. Everything about my ship now becomes faster. I lose the ability to recharge my weapons. I lose my shield recharge. I lose all that stuff. But because I've been smart, I've been a good little boy, I've been a good pilot, I've kept my shields to maximum, I've charged up my capacitor bank, and if anything, I've charged up my weapons so much that I get an overcharge, which means my weapons get an extra 25 shots, and they do more damage. But if I don't keep that power up, it slowly dissipates because the charge only holds for so long, right? Again, that system was used in Squadrons and other shooter games like Star Wars games and Free Space and whatnot, and it works really well because it promotes timing, right? So if I know, okay, I'm coming in on that guy right now, I know I'm going to get a shot in a couple seconds, I'm going to charge my guns, whoop, and get an extra couple shots back into engine so I can actually tail chase and catch him. And then I'm going to fire with what I have. And first of all, what you have has to be enough to get the kill. That's number one. Because if you have enough capacitor and you don't even have enough to make, I can't say how many times I've flown in behind somebody at 200 meters, dropped in the entire mag until my guns are hot, and I'm just staring at the back of his ship.
Do you know what I really want? And I tell me if this is in squadrons or not. I want there to be a way to know what your opponent, like, what capacitor mode they might be in. So it's this cat and mouse game maybe that is like, all right.
But
they're
why would
full
that
power,
matter though?
Because if I know they're full power to engines, then I can counter them with going full power to guns and countering them or something. Is that does that make sense?
So this speaks to, like, so I see what you're asking, but that's not how it's going to work out, because if
Fair
you go
enough.
into guns, you're going to lose, because you have to have a trade-off. So
Yeah.
if I go into weapons, I'm sacrificing shields and guns, or sorry, shields and engines, because if I choose one over the other, right?
Yes.
And if I go in the,
if you're
if I
in
go in
engines,
the,
you maneuver around me and then back into engines and then or back into guns and then kill me.
if I'm dry on my magazine, but if I'm smart about it and I have trigger discipline and I know when to fire and I know what ranges to fire at, it rewards the smart pilot. It rewards the skill of the pilot knowing when to fire, what range to fire at, what orientation to fire at, and actually hitting the target. So that's been removed entirely.
Yeah, and you
with
could
the way
kinda
the gunner
tell
system
anyway,
is.
right? I feel like Vergjl mentioned in one of his videos, like I could tell he didn't put his capacitor to
Yeah,
shields.
I would argue that it's like a better thing to not know, Mike.
Okay.
Because then you're playing poker. You know, it's like
I know.
Yeah.
buffing,
That's
you
what
know,
I
it's
try
like-
to.
Yeah,
I try
you're
to,
like
like-
guessing and trying to predict
Yeah.
their capacitor. It gets a bit interesting there.
So
Okay.
And
let me-
again, that's a high level mechanic.
So let me
Yeah.
give you this example, right? If we had higher SCM speeds, right, and we had slightly lower weapon speeds, or we had a way better gunnery system. So if we're going to stay with the PIP system like it is now, then we have to adjust weapon velocities and distances and stuff, because people are just going to be shooting at the PIP. And the more aim assist you give, the less emphasis you actually have on the flight and shooting aspect of it, and just much more based on the twitch. You know, like I just put the little dot on the target and pull the trigger. So
Gotcha.
in a system that, if I were to design it, is put 100% power to engines, you get your higher SCM speeds, all that stuff. But if I fire and I miss, or I fire and I'm out of bullets, it's like, damn. But let's say I got a couple people on me, got people, I'm engaging and I need to get out. Well, I'm going to stay in engines and I'm going to go. I'm going to get out of there, because the guy that's chasing me, if I can evade enough of his shots, he's going to be mag dry, which means he's got to go into weapons. I got to wait. Then you got to go back into engines. I'm going to keep separating distance. I'm going to keep leaving because I'm in engines. So I'm out. See you later. I can actually separate based on his power allocation. And if he chooses to follow me, well, he's got no guns left. Like, you fired your mag, bro. Like, you're dry. So hi, you can chase me all day, but you're not going to do any damage.
Fair.
So, and it adds to the chase mechanic, because they're so desperately trying to get the game into this place where it feels like World War II, where it's like, oh, get into a bank fight and chase. Well, the reason that happens in atmosphere is because you have 3 degrees of freedom. I can't strafe or change my angle. I have to go forward or I lose airspeed and I fall into the sky. Like, that doesn't happen in space, So inherently, all these metrics that they're trying to do, all the ways that they're trying to adjust the SCMs, change the shape and this and that, is to promote that kind of behavior. So let's just pull the bandage off and let's make that happen, right? Let's get a gunnery system that actually forces that. Let's get a power management system that rewards that kind of gameplay. Because in order to get away, I've got to use the edge of my circle, my cone, which is the fastest, which is off my main thruster, to go out of the fight. It's the same way we have an afterburner, but because, again, the tuning is so off, you go from low energy to instantly high energy so fast that I don't need to be a good pilot. I just need to know when to press a button, because I don't need to worry about my angle relative to him, or where I'm drifting, or this, that, or actual like flight geometry. I'm just like, stay on target, bang, 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 bang. Oh, someone's on me. Guess what? I'm an interceptor. Hit the big red button, and then off I go, right? And it's just,
That's a gift.
that's a gift.
But just quickly, and to credit
I would
your
say
debate,
I would say,
I'm not too in love. Go
by
ahead.
the way, just I don't want to interrupt. I'm so sorry, but
You're
we've
right,
actually
yeah.
hit my fucking time limit today, which I thought we'd hit Vergjl's, but we've hit mine. So I would say,
Yeah,
like, start making your
Sorry,
final. No, it's totally fine. I just have a hockey game early today, very early in comparison to normal. They're normally at 10 p.m. and today they're at 2 p.m. So, Yeah, I would just start saying, like, wrapping up your final thoughts and what you want to say to people about all this. But go ahead, Virgil, before we get there.
I was just gonna say like I'm impartial to the capacitors. I just as long as it's interesting,
Yep.
proactive, and adds depth, maybe raises the ceiling a bit. Good. You know, I
Which
don't
doesn't
mind what
exist
shape
now,
it
right?
comes in. Yeah, yeah. Like I'm not.
Less so.
You know, I think there's bigger issues. You know, but it like once those issues get sorted out, probably eyes will be on making the capacitor better. So
Yeah, which is
it needs
probably
to
the reason.
improve, but yeah, I'm not stressing out so much about it. One thing I just wanted to mention too, like hopefully this doesn't take long. We could just cover this real quick because it's worth giving these guys a shout out. But the fact there's no quantum in addiction, you know, like or how this is going to play out in the PU with non-combatants flying around at nav mode speeds, and then the SCM pilots being in combat speeds unable to engage them. Like when I watched the SCL, I thought that they were kind of under the impression that the non-combatants were going to be at risk because they didn't have shields but were flying at nav speeds. I thought the balance was the opposite way. I think that because non-combatants like cargo haulers are going to be in nav mode majority of their trips, they're not going to be at risk because all the combatants are going to be at SCM. So I was calling it like a soft PvP slider because anyone not interested in PvP is at 1200 and anyone interested in PvP is at 300. So that's the big question I'm looking to get answered when this drops to PU is what does SCM pilot combat look like when it's trying to catch nav mode piloting?
Yeah.
And then the fact that we don't have there's not a plan yet that we're getting told about when it comes to interdicting players out of nav. So I just worry about the whole ecosystem there. Like bounty is going to be able to get into nav, and then that's it. They'll never be caught because even if you do, as a bounty hunter, chase them in nav, you've got no weapons or options to bring them out of it. I worry about the piracy players. Can they just not catch up to their prey at all?
I mean, are
Stuff like that.
I think, are we in a situation where the piracy, I mean, I know Avenger did it, I know Vergjl did it, I've done it. It was so great. It was so rewarding. It was so fun for a while there until basically everybody had so much money it didn't feel meaningful anymore, which is a whole nother thing. We might just have to deal with, and it is what it is, a really shitty patch for piracy for a little while. And then we might get a better one in the future. I mean, we've had these give and takes for a while now with Star Citizen where they tune something in one direction too far and then come back too far the other way and then sometimes find a middle ground. I think we're dealing with that with master modes at the moment. And yeah, I think we'll eventually get there, but I am nervous about it, but I think it's going to be an inevitability that the initial 323 patch is not going to be fucking fun from that standpoint. It just won't.
Hopefully, an addiction comes in like 323.1 or something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, like quite quickly after, right? Is they're going to see
we don't
that,
want it to be a 6-9 months down the line,
which they've been prone to do. Which is one of those things where, like I mentioned, do we trust them? Kind of thing. We have to have faith that if you're doing this framework conversation, every damn patch we better see changes, improvements, tests, this experimental mode. Oh, we're trying this. Oh, we're trying that. We're listening. Like that's, for me, that's how I want to end this conversation on my side of it, is you try whatever the fuck you want, guys, but listen to us. Just listen, take the feedback in and continue to iterate on it and show us that you care and that you want to keep trying and you're trying to make this the game the best you possibly can, because Avenger's been here for 12 years. I've been here for 12 years. Virgil's been here for close to that. I think 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. And we've watched this happen way too often. And I'm done dealing with this bullshit. I'm done with it. Keep iterating patch by patch by patch. You have your dedicated strike teams on these things. Strike this shit and get it right. That's how I'm okay with you getting it wrong for a time, but keep trying to get it right. That's all I care about. Keep trying. And sometimes it feels like they work on one thing and then move to another. Like for me, boys, we better not be moving to control surfaces the moment this shit gets in. We better nail down master modes and then move down to control surfaces. That's my opinion here on this.
Well, you could argue that control surface is part of master modes.
It's part of it, but is we're arguing today that the framework of master modes isn't quite there yet from the space combat, the main part of the feeling, the experience, I feel like needs to be nailed down, and then you get the feeling and experience of the nuance of aerodynamic combat, or on a planet's surface or whatever, right? Then I think you can make it really spicy there. But I could be wrong here, so feel free to jump in on that.
It's funny.
But
I mean, they have a great opportunity to make an amazing space shooter and an amazing atmospheric shooter.
yeah,
I mean, you can just go down to a planet. If you want to do atmospheric flight, go down
Yep.
to a planet.
and
I mean,
and
there's
hopefully
going to be
we're
tons of content at
yeah.
planets.
Hopefully we're fighting over things and against NPCs and players in space over certain things and certain things on surface, right? So you can get both.
I do think we need to address one thing before we go.
Sure.
Oh, quick. Let's be quick.
Be quick, though, please.
I feel like I have to say this because I feel it to be true. Is the reality is we're not, like, we as PvPers, we don't make money for CIG. We cause problems. That's the argument. That's always been the argument, right? All pirates and griefers, this and that, they just ruin the experience for people, blah, 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 And I just want to point this out, that you're testing 400 player servers. You're going to have a lot more interaction with people. The game is always going to have PvP. It is a multiplayer game, right? If CIG wants to make lots of money, which I think every company should seriously consider, is take the feedback from guys like me and Vergjl and other people in the community who do have a lot of experience in the multiplayer sector. Don't shrug it off and poo-poo it and be like, oh, go make your own fucking game or whatever. We're doing this because we love the project. We want the game to be successful. And if you want Star Citizen to make it in the long term, you have to have a solid multiplayer foundation. And that happens by having solid mechanics. Because, like it or not, if you have hundreds of people, and if it really does become the way they're saying, where they have thousands of people playing and this and that, well, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have 1,000-man wars and tons of combat and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And that's a good thing. But what you don't want is these 1,000-man wars to never happen, to never get people interested in coming over, to never have that, flourish in the game, because the gameplay is just not there to get that going. There's a reason why, games like Albion Online don't flourish very well. And there's a reason why games like EVE Online have been around for 20 years plus, is you're always going to have a burst of activity when the game first comes out. But the game that the people that keep your game alive are the core audience that plays time and time and time again, who pay a subscription every month to keep the servers up. That's what is going to keep your game alive for the long term, right? So on one side, make your money off bringing the skill ceiling up, so that everyone can get access to it, because you're going to get more money by getting lots of people involved. But don't forget that what's going to keep them involved, what's going to keep the game alive, is the depth of the gameplay, right? So anyway.
Yep, I'm with you on that. All right, well, let's summarize it up. Yeah, we'll do our parting messages, right, Mike? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, guys, I think it's I'm understanding it's a framework. I think it's great that we've now included all the different backgrounds to play the game from, and now that everybody gets included into PvP now is a really great thing. I think we're inevitably going to get there. I think the light fighter guys that are mad that, some stuff has been taken away from us, I think we're going to get it back, inevitably so. I do. I just have that confidence in them, especially after, them admirably saying that they, of their shortcomings on SCL. So, I'm with the team on it, man. I'm positive, toxic positivity. I've got faith in it. I think we're in a better place. I think it's going to play better on the MMO. It's less broken, and it's got room to grow in a really good direction. So I'm happy about it. And I really enjoyed the podcast. Yeah, it was great reading the comments. Great having a conversation with you two. And yeah, we got to 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Easily,
hey, suddenly
too.
My 2-hour videos aren't so bad, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It takes me days to get through your videos, though, just to be fair.
It's going to take everyone 3 weeks to get through this one.
I know, which is why we like to keep them to 2 hours, but I don't know how we could with this. It's just impossible, right? To get through everything, it's just going to take a while, right? It is what it is. But go ahead, Avenger. What are your final thoughts on all this? And is it all doom and gloom? How people are putting you in this box, or is the future a little brighter than people think you think it is?
Like, I admit that you could make the argument, oh, A1 sounds a bit, flustered. I'm an animated guy. No, nobody's doubting that.
I've been there.
Am I worried? Yeah, absolutely. Am I convinced the game is going to be a total failure and this and that? Absolutely not. I think genuinely the guys that are working on this project, especially the guys like Yogi and Yogi's team, if it wasn't for those guys, I wouldn't have a lot of faith in it. But because I know some of those guys and I know that what they're doing is they got their heart in the right spot and they got their brain there too, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think because I'm so hard on the current, and again, I'll stress this, the current iteration of master modes, just because I've been so hard on it, because I play it every day, right? I mean, you expect me to go from Formula 1 cars to bumper carts. I'm not going to be happy about it, right? But I like to speak my mind. I like to be honest about it. I like to be honest with how I feel about it. And for some people, that's good, bad. I'm not a stoic kind of guy that sits there and has no emotion about stuff. I'm going to be honest about how I feel about stuff. And maybe that can be taken as like, oh, he's being doom and gloom. But the point is, it's going to get better because it has to. The gameplay is going to be improving because it has to. And guys like me and Vergjl and other people in the community, I think we've been put in a box unfairly, and I cannot compete against the Reddit and Spectrum propaganda machine that is much larger than a single person. So the next time you hear someone saying, oh, those PvPers only want this, that, and the other, do yourself a favor, go educate yourself, go watch some of the videos that myself and Vergjl put out, think about it, understand what we're trying to say, and realize that I don't want to like fighter meta any more than the next guy. I want to see.
I literally froze. Sorry.
I want to see all that stuff. I want to see the multi-crew ships in a great spot. I want to take the Polaris out with welcome back. I want to see the Polaris. I want to go out with the Hammerhead and the rest of my guys and actually, in a non-memey way, be like, Kate, we're taking the Hammerhead out today, boys, and actually have it be a meta in a sense that it's something that's worth our time spending in PvP, or Polaris and all these things. I don't want to live in a world where it's like bring a gang of Gladiuses and they do everything. I don't want to live in that world either. So if people say that about me, it's not true. Do yourself a favor and educate yourself and go play master modes. Go play it. Go play it until you can't stand it and then play it some more, right? Yep. Because that's the only time you're going to really start to realize, is this a game I want to play for the next 10 to 15 years? Because if you want to play Star Citizen, like for the lifespan of the game, that's what I want. I don't want to play Star Citizen and be done with it. We've been at it for 12 years already. What's another 12 more? So go play
Arthritis.
It's worth mentioning too, like, for the most part, like almost the entire, width or length of this podcast, we all agreed, didn't we?
For the most part,
we all found common ground in almost all of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've had to clack my keyboard a lot in chat where people are still doing he's only saying, or Vergjl's only saying, or they're only talking about PvP, or they're only talking about these given scenarios. And it's like, no, everybody consistently said throughout this podcast, we want everybody to enjoy Star Citizen. We want, people who enjoy combat to enjoy combat. That's kind of what this is about, right? This is what this specific podcast is about, is how to make combat enjoyable. That's not negating anybody else and their other situations, right?
It wouldn't be fair for us to comment on racing. We're not racing. It wouldn't be fair for us to talk about how hard it is to survive in a logistics ship. Yep. It's not our expertise. It'd be really poor of us to, break down and pretend to be experts at it.
I have my thoughts on it, but the truth is, I'm not a racer. Yeah, I'm not a logistics guy. I don't do that stuff. So I'm going to go to the people that do that stuff and listen to them and be like, how do they feel about it,
Yep.
So,
and then hopefully that doesn't break your, the whole thing is that everybody needs to address is the combat pilots here are not trying to break your game, and they don't want you to break their game. Everybody wants everybody to enjoy the game, period. Yep. Right? And I think that's the place where I think we expressed that very clearly. If that didn't come through, you probably didn't make it to this part of the video anyway, but it is what it is, and that's kind of on you. But I thought we made that very clear, and yeah. But I guess this is where we'll end it. I just want to thank you two for coming on. Again, being respectful, speaking to each other. You know, getting animated is whatever. If people are watching this channel, they've seen fucking animated for sure, right? So everyone here should be used to that. So that shouldn't have been an issue. This chair has been punched quite a few times, and I can thank Zach from the FPS team for that one a lot lately. So we've dealt with that plenty. But in general, I feel very similar to you guys. I think we have somewhat of a good framework, and we got to build on it a bit and make it better, because I think maybe it's dialed one way too much and not another. And for me, as long as they are willing to make changes and willing to try to get to that point, then we are in the right place with the right devs, with the right game, because I don't think anybody here wants to play another game, right? We don't want to go to the next game. We want this to be it. And that's it, right?
Star Atlas is a scam. Yep.
True, right? Like, I think that goes from every aspect of the game. So with that, guys, where can everybody find you, Avenger, Vergjl? And we got links in the YouTube already. And if any mods are around, can you please spam some links for these guys?
It's Avenger__1 on Twitch, and it's Avenger1, no underscores, on YouTube. And
there you go.
There's other links to my socials on those things.
Yep.
Yeah, just VER9JL. That's it. That's me on everything.
You'll find them on
Appreciate
everything.
it, guys.
And just so you know, if you do search Avenger__1 on YouTube, you will still find him, because that's how I grab links and stuff as well. I was able to get them that way. So there's when you're in the algorithm, you're in the algorithm. When you've been around long enough, it'll find you. So yeah, I just want to thank you two guys. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and I hope everybody learned a little something, and I hope everybody's calmed down a little bit as well. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, and we'll see you next week back with Croncy, and I don't know what we'll talk about. Maybe server meshing or something. So yeah. But thank you for everything, guys. It was awesome. All right. So you're back on camera.
Bruh.
People can see you. And I'll make it so they can't now. There.
Dude,
so feel free to turn your cameras off and all that stuff.
I haven't had the energy it's too early in the morning for me to look at chat.
No, I handled chat. Croncy handled chat on the podcast.